Every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday. Tuesday, Casual Tuesday. Wednesday, Casual Hump Day. Thursday, Casual Thurs. That's what we call it. And Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
It is Friday, July 31st, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal, the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Heather Parton, or Digby, from the blog Hullabaloo, will be joining us. Also on the program, from the David Feldman Show, David Feldman himself will be here. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's all in on his operation to delegitimize the election. Republican Senate adjourns without touching federal unemployment benefits, which are set to end today. The Department of Homeland Security is compiling dossiers on journalists. Obama and Sanders come out with support for ending the filibuster. Meanwhile, with almost a third of the country covered underwater, Bangladesh suffers massive flooding, millions left with literally nothing. The full court of appeals will, the D.C. Circuit Full Court of Appeals, to review the DOJ's attempts to drop charges against Michael Flynn. Kamala Harris's record of defying the U.S. Supreme Court's orders to release nonviolent prisoners in overcrowded prisons in California put her VP chances on shaky ground. Meanwhile, Bolivians protest against their right-wing coup government's attempts to delay elections. And a new report: Jared Kushner quashed a national testing plan because he thought COVID was only hitting blue states. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, folks. Thanks for joining us. It is Friday. It's Casual Friday. I am wearing my soft collared shirt. I was going to say basically the soft collared shirt I have. I realized this morning I wear this shirt almost every Friday, but I like it. It's comfortable. It is collared. It buttons up, and it's soft. So I'm going to wear that. Thank you for joining us. Got a lot of notes of appreciation about yesterday's show. Jamie, Matt, and Matt. People really appreciated the work yesterday. Always worried about crossing the two Matts because you're crossing the temporal plane with old Matt and new Matt. But fortunately, nothing went wrong from a physics standpoint. That can be
space-time is intact.
Yeah, I mean, apparently, like, there's a chance, right, for like you open up some type of black hole and everybody gets sucked into it or something to that effect. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but antimatter and matter, when they hit, something along those lines.
CERN was watching very closely yesterday.
Speaking of which, a science question. I just want to get this out of the way. The other day, I read from a YouTube comment regarding the relative size of a coronavirus molecule, I guess, and a CO2 molecule. And I failed, even though I I made a point of making sure that I did, and apparently I did not, in citing who it was that left that comment. It was Timothy Halvorson. And I also, apparently I failed to call him a genius. So, but I, at the very least, will cite his name. I'm just not going to go on record saying that he's a genius. But so I do appreciate that. Also, just a reminder, this program relies on your support. You can support this program by becoming a member. Go to jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, we now have merch. You can go to shop.majorityreportradio.com to check out the merch. And as always, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. There is a lot in the news today, and none of it particularly good for the Republicans, which makes me happy. Let's go into this, however, because it is, and maybe we'll talk maybe a little bit about this with Digby. The Trump campaign has suspended its ad buys, and they are supposedly going to be retooling things. It's going to be interesting to see which direction that heads into. I don't know that there's much to be salvaged at this point for the Trump campaign. I think they are instead going to reorient themselves, it would appear, to really fundamentally attacking the legitimacy of the election in some fashion. Now, the other thing that is sort of interesting is that there's apparently like $170 million that is sort of unaccounted for in their campaign. There are charges, or I should say, violations being filed with the FEC. But you'll recall, I think it was about a month ago, one of the Republican commissioners resigned. And when she did, this is the Federal Elections Commission. When she did, she basically rendered the commission inoperable, because you need at least 4 commissioners on there, or 5. And I think there's only 4 now. I'll double check that, but it is inoperative. Let's put it that way. And so there's a quality of like, rev up the getaway car, but who knows? The only reason why also I think this is going to be the concerted push is that, is because that's what Fox and Friends is talking about. Here's Brian Kilmeade, who is on Fox News, on Fox and Friends, arguing that, of course, he's parroting what Bill Barr said this week, which was, it's only common sense that will tell you that foreign adversaries could use mail-in ballots as a way of throwing the election.
Just use logic. Don't wait for CBS to do a report, which ended up proving that Trump was right. Just use logic. You sit in your house, there's 5 ballots on your, for your family, 3 of your kids, 18 to 21. I'm not going to vote. You could vote for me. You could send it in. When I get around to doing it, you click the box. A domineering parent tells the kids how they're going to vote, or some kids will grab their parents' ballot and send it. Can't we just have this one moment to vote for one candidate every 4 years and show up and put a ballot in without licking an envelope or pressing on a stamp? If you can shop for food, if you can buy liquor, you can vote once every 4 years.
It's so true. How many shared civic moments do we have in this country
None.
right now? Where
Every 4 years.
Every 4 years, one time. That's all.
God.
Just one thing. Can we come together?
Pause
do
it.
it
Wait.
responsibly.
We need to deal with the first part before we get on to their lamentation that there are no shared civic moments in this country, like standing in line for multiple hours because the Republican Secretary of State has closed 90% of the polling places. That's what they're talking about, of course. But contemplate what Kilmeade is saying here. Use logic. If you vote there, you're going to have God knows how many households with multiple children over the age of 18, right? They're with their parents, multiple children over the age of 18 who are at home getting their ballots, who don't care about voting. They registered. They don't care about voting. Parents who are so gung-ho to vote are going to actually write in their ballots, going to sign their ballots, or maybe the kids will come and sign it because they don't care. Do we really think this is a major problem in this country?
I was going to say, one of those examples where it's just like your friend turns your ballot in for you. Like, okay, sure. I'm fine with that.
I mean, or what, like these kids. So what's the idea that we just don't, these kids wouldn't vote? In Kilmeade's mind, these kids who live at home, they're over 18. They're not kids.
Over 18, yeah.
So there's multiple kids living in the home, multiple adults living in the home who are children of the parents. They're over the age of 18 now, right? So in presuming that, unless they're twins, one could be like 18 in a week.
Oh, man. This makes me want to watch Step Brothers.
The other, exactly. Well, that's the thing you have to really worry about is families where you have like a Brady Bunch situation. Yeah. Because then you could have like you could have two 18-year-olds, two 19-year-olds, two 20-year-olds.
Oof.
And you could have if you
think about the voter fraud
kids, and then the Brady parents would force their kids or fill out their ballots, then you'd have two people with access to 6 ballots.
Damn.
And we got to watch out for that. But wait a second. Let's get back to the other part where these guys who would never, ever, ever in a million years call for voting election day to be a national holiday are still going to lament the fact that we don't have a shared civic day together.
4 years.
It's so true. How many shared civic moments do we have in this country
None.
right now? Where we
every 4 years.
Every 4 years, one time. That's all. Just one thing. Can we come together? Do it responsibly. If you need to request an absentee ballot, as the president made very clear, that's what he's talking about. I messed up my ballot in the New Jersey primary this year. I lost the secure envelope inside it. So I had to go in and vote provisionally, which means my vote didn't even count unless they needed it. Yeah. What a mess if that's nationwide as they push ballots out to these voter rolls, many of which are outdated anyway.
Well, incidentally, that guy doesn't believe in washing hands. I don't know if people remember that, but he literally does not believe in washing hands. He doesn't believe that germs exist because he can't see them or something. I'm not making that up. That was something he very proudly was talking about a year ago. So because he's irresponsible with his ballot, he thinks everyone will be. I really love the fact that they're now lamenting the shared civic moment.
How about we make a day? Yeah, exactly.
Holiday for elections.
For civic moments.
Yes.
Let's make more holidays for civic moments.
I was going to say, maybe we should make the work day just like 6.5 hours. So we each get like an hour and a half long civic moment.
Yeah. Or even like a 4-day work week, we can have a civic Friday.
Civic Fridays. TGICF. No, all right, it's not going to catch on, folks.
New merch.
A word from our sponsors. We are sponsored by Sunset Lake CBD. They are a family-owned farm that was producing milk for Ben and Jerry's, and then they decided to diversify. They're growing hemp, 100%. Pesticide free. They only use organic fertilizers. You can go and you can check their purity tests. They have a documentation on their sites. All the stuff is certified. They work with the University of Vermont to implement regenerative agricultural practices. They pay a minimum of $15 an hour to all of their employees. The company is majority owned by employees. And their CBD has turned at least two of us on this program from skeptics into true believers. I'm not a big smoker of CBD. I have used now the tincture for sleeping. I have used it on eczema that I've gotten on my hands, on my ankles. A buddy of mine had shingles. I sent him the salve. He loved it. My daughter had, I'm not going to go into the details, but I used the tincture topically. There's no, and I'm making no, I'm only telling you what my experience has been with it. I think you're supposed to ingest it, and I do to go to sleep, but I'm using it topically on things, and it's working. As like, I guess, an analgesic, I don't know what they call it. But they also have gummy bears that deliver 1,000 milligrams, is that it, of CBD. Those are delicious, too delicious. They have CBD coffee, infused coffee, and then they have smokables that Matt, who was a CBD smokable skeptic, is now a former skeptic.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan of these smalls, which come in nice little nuggets that you can put in your grinder. Also, so they sent me this giant CBD I don't even know what to call it, joint. And I wasn't sure when I was going to ever smoke it, but I took up to Massachusetts this weekend, and you can see kind of how much I smoked of it.
Good job.
And I felt very relaxed. So I don't know if this is one of their normal product lines, but I appreciate them sending it to me, and it was an interesting experience. So
they are fans of the show. You can go and use the code Left is Best. One word, Left is Best. Get 20% off. All of the if you purchase now today, July, they are donating 4.20% of all online sales to the Drug Policy Alliance, whose mission is to advance policies and attitudes that best reduce the harms of drug use and drug prohibition. So it's 4.20% during the month of July. So you can check that out for today anyways. I don't know if they're going to extend that, but check it out. SunsetLakeCBD.com. We'll put the link in our podcast description. Also, as you know, there's never a bad time to learn something new, but sometimes you don't have enough time. My recommendation to deal with both of those things, Blinkist. It's an app that goes on your iPad, your iPhone, or your Android pad or Android phone, your computer. It takes the key insights of over 3,000 nonfiction bestsellers in over 27 categories and condenses them down into blinks, which you can read or listen to in 15 minutes. Blinkist also offers its member exclusive original podcasts from top authors and creative thinkers. You can dive deeper into full-length nonfiction audiobooks at a special discounted price. Over 14 million people have been using Blinkist to deepen their knowledge about topics spanning from self-improvement, management, entrepreneurship, happiness, but things like history and politics as well. For me, what I find is the best thing about Blinkist is that there are titles of books that I feel like I should have a sense of what they are about, but I don't necessarily want to read them the entire book. I'm sorry to those authors. That's just the case. I'm a jerk. There are other books too where it's like, I don't need to read the prose of somebody who's telling me how to, be more efficient with my time, let's say. In fact, if you're going to be efficient with your time, the best way to read a book about that or to listen to one is with Blinkist. So for instance, Why We Sleep. I would like to know what is important about the idea of why we sleep. So I'm going to check out Matthew Walker's Blinkist. I'm not going to read the whole book. I'm sorry, Mr. Walker, but I will check out Blinkist to get the key points of why we sleep. Maybe you haven't read Rachel Maddow's book, Blowout. Maybe you don't want to, but you want to get a sense of what she's talking about. Blinkist. It's the perfect way to do it. So right now, Blinkist has a special offer for just our audience. You go to Blinkist.com/Majority Report. Start your 7-day free trial. You get 25% off a Blinkist premium membership and up to 65% off of audiobooks. Yours to keep forever, Matt Leck. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/Majority Report to get 25% off a premium membership and a 7-day free trial to see if you like it. Blinkist.com/Majority Report. Again, we'll put that link in our podcast description. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Digby. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program the proprietor of the blog Hullabaloo and the columnist at Salon.com, Heather Digby Parton. Heather, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Sam. It's been a while. I'm glad to be here.
It has indeed.
You want the song?
What's that?
You want the song here?
Oh gosh, I forgot. It's been that long, but this thing still works.
Are you ready for some Digby? Yeah. Are you ready for some Digby, 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 yeah. And a bit of hullabaloo, a bit of hullabaloo should do ya. How about some hullabaloo? Just rub it on ya. It's so good for ya.
That's good. That's good. Does that song say "Rub It On You"?
I think
don't
it
know
says
if I
so
ever-
good for you.
I didn't pick that up before. Heather, thanks for joining
Okay,
us.
I'm good with that. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Yes. So, all right, let's get into this. It is a pretty crazy news day, even for this era. And I know you've written this week about Bill Barr and about where we are in terms of COVID. I mean, we had multiple right-wing, I guess, I don't know, luminaries die this week of COVID-19. One, Montgomery, the co-founder of Turning Points USA, an organization which was putting out anti-mask rhetoric as recently as 3 days ago. Montgomery died 2 days ago. Herman Cain died. He was putting out anti-mask tweets and whatnot right before he caught COVID-19. Neither one of these guys were prominent enough in my mind for me to celebrate. Because I don't want to come off as I'm sort of above that. If I think someone is really damaging to the country, I am happy to acknowledge that I think that the world is a better place without them on some level. But neither one of them sort of reached that level. They're not like Anton and Scalia, who had, a lot of things control over. But it does set a certain, it does. I don't know. I mean, it sort of sets the table in a certain way. Like I'm reading, there were these quotes from Political Playbook for like what's going on in Republican offices. I don't know if you saw this, but they were crazy.
I did.
And I wanted to read a couple of these. From a scheduler to a House Republican member, our office has been required to be fully staffed since session resumed at end of June, including an intern. While mask use isn't banned, what? It's also not encouraged and has been derided on several occasions by the chief of staff and the Congress member. Oh, Louis Gohmert also had it this week, and we'll find out in a couple of days if he infected other people. From an aide to a Republican member who had COVID. I'm obviously not allowed to speak on behalf of anyone, but it may be worth looking into how many Republican offices are also requiring all staff and interns to come in while taking no precautions. Ridiculing people for wearing masks is also not uncommon. I think you'd find a lot of offices in the anti-mask brigade are forcing staff to report to work even if they have legitimate concerns about their health. I'm sure you could also find some are having staff travel to districts in high-risk areas and not providing for quarantine afterwards. There's a general fear that saying anything critical of the current policy or lack of policy will lead to retaliation. That's cancel culture. But we don't hear much about that. Just give me your sense of where we are, I guess, from a political standpoint on this COVID stuff.
Well, it seemed for a while. I think, that when that latest round of really bad polling came out, and Trump ended up firing, demoting Brad Parscale, his campaign manager, and they, promoted, I can't remember the guy's name, but the new
Bill
campaign
Stepien.
manager, and Kellyanne Conway. Yeah, Stepien. Right, Chris Christie's former guy. Kellyanne Conway came out and said, well, we think it's a great idea. The president needs to be speaking out more about the virus, and he's got to be more involved. And the consensus was that they kind of understood that this thing had really gone sideways and that it was really bad, and they were going to need to step it up because Trump was suffering in the polls almost, for two reasons. Well, for many reasons, but the one that had really sunk his poll numbers were a combination of his terrible response to the coronavirus crisis and also his, completely, insane reaction to the Black Lives Matter protests. So they figured they had to come out and do something with the virus, and particularly they found out that it was reported just this week that when they presented him evidence that it was actually killing his own voters, that's kind of, he sort of responded to that and said, well, gee, maybe I better not do
That's
that.
bad,
Maybe I better
right?
do something about this.
That's bad.
So in any case, there was this idea that, I'm sorry, what?
That's bad, right? Killing my own voters? That's bad.
Yeah. I would have thought that would be something that could have occurred to him earlier, particularly with the age group that had been most affected by the death toll. But, hey, apparently they had to go and show him some numbers. And then suddenly he realized that maybe killing his own voters wasn't a great idea. But in any case, what we thought is that there was a readjustment just based on, just rank, cynical, political, motives, that they were going to have to do something about this. So, I really kind of thought, well, maybe they recognize that Florida is, it's dying. I mean, the place is just, it is on fire with COVID right now. Maybe they'll do something. Well, they decided to do those, the new coronavirus briefings, the sort of resurgence of those. And he came out, and at first we thought, okay, so he's going to read some stuff that was clearly written by someone else, and he'd woodenly recite it like he's, reciting somebody else's book report. And then he would take questions from the press, which, sort of was what got him into trouble the last time. And so he did. And I kind of thought, well, maybe he'll do it. Now, of course, he screwed up from the beginning. Some reporter asked him about Ghislaine Maxwell. And he said, well, I wish her well. I've known her for years. We were neighbors in Palm Beach. And I really wish her well. I mean, she is an accused underage sex trafficker. So, that didn't go over very well. And that was one thing that got him into trouble. And then subsequent to that, it seems like the whole thing's fallen apart. And he's out there pimping hydroxychloroquine again. He's talking about these quack doctors who are out there pushing it, one of whom is a real crackpot who's was out there, who's apparently been saying that women are infected with demon seed, and the alien doctors are putting alien DNA in their patients, and just a bunch of really crazy stuff. And he was saying he found her very impressive.
Well, I got to admit too, I got to admit too, as a doctor, I find that very impressive. When you have evidence of alien DNA in medicine and can attribute all sorts of maladies to sleeping with demons or witches, I find that impressive. Maybe in a different way, probably than the president does. But
well, I mean, this is where we're really right back where we were as far as the president taking charge of the COVID crisis. And, it's as bad as it was back when he was saying that he wanted his scientists to look into whether or not, we should inject disinfectant because it works so well on countertops. Why not on people? I mean, so they can't do anything about him. I guess my point is that they, as much as they tried to sort of do some kind of a pivot, it didn't really work, at least in terms of the coronavirus. So you see this stuff. Now let's take, you mentioned Gohmert and you mentioned Herman Cain. His national security advisor came down with it this week also. And here's the thing about, he got it. He tested positive. He'd been running all over Europe without wearing a mask. I'm not sure why they let him. Apparently they had some sort of assurance over in Europe that he didn't have it. And then it turns out that he may have had it. He came back home, he got tested, he got it, and he's actually feeling symptoms apparently. He's been at home, so he's not one of those asymptomatic, I tested positive, but I didn't feel anything. And we don't really know what his status is at the moment. But he didn't tell his staff. mention it. It's just like what you say about the Congress. They got, when Gohmert tested positive, he was getting on the plane with Trump, by the way. He was getting ready to get on Air Force One, and they tested him because Trump was going to Texas for a fundraiser, and they found out he had it. So what did he do? He didn't go home. He went back to the office, and he filmed a maskless, video in which he, indicated he thought maybe he got it from wearing the mask, another one of these right-wing tropes. And that's when the flood of all these staff members came in to Politico, where they were saying, look, this is really bad, because, Gohmert knew he had it, and he went back to the office and, basically exposed everybody in the office to it. The same thing happened with Robert O'Brien, the guy in the White House, the national security advisor, who didn't tell his staff that he tested positive. So, the upshot is that these people still, after all we've seen, after all we know, after the numbers have gone crazy, the death rate is skyrocketing again, they still don't take it seriously. And Trump even said yesterday at his briefing, pretty much indicated that he still thinks it's a Democratic hoax. He said, hey, on November 4th, believe me, and November 4th, they'll reopen the country the day after the election. If they win, they'll be reopening, pretty clearly thinking that there's nothing to this. So I don't know, I have very little hope at this point that they're going to do anything about this, that there's any hope for any kind of a strategy beyond just, grinding it out and getting through it until the first of the year. What are they going to do? What in great moment of what epiphany are these people going to have when it's even in the White House, when the national security advisor has it, when Herman Cain dies of it, who pretty clearly, I think there's a lot of evidence he got it at that rally. Other people did. The public health officer in Tulsa said that the rally spread the virus. And, here we are, it's just one, we're just taking one day after another, having to deal with this thing as it now Deborah Burke said that it's, it's working its way up the country. It's going to Tennessee now. It's going to Kentucky, Ohio Valley. They're watching it happen and nothing is being done. And, you put this on top of the news that we got last night from this Vanity Fair article that Jared and his whiz kids, who, remember, they were running a separate coronavirus task force on a different track than the official one throughout the spring. I don't even know if it still exists, but it did at the time, where he was interfering in all kinds of stuff. But apparently their whiz kids did come up with a national testing and tracing plan. They came up with one. They had it all on paper, ready to go to the president. He was ready to receive it. Apparently, this was going to happen in the early part of April. And they had a meeting, and somebody brought up the fact, hey, this is only hitting the blue states. Maybe we ought to just let this thing run its course. We don't need a national plan. Let the Democratic governors take the blame for the coronavirus. And Jared went, you know what? That's a hell of a good political decision. Let me read. Let's do that.
I want to read this quote. I want to read this read this segment of the report that you're talking about. Is from oh gosh, it's it's written up in Vanity Fair. Sorry. And let me just read from that, because this is the kind of stuff that in a functioning democracy, this guy is maybe brought up in charges after, the election for this type of stuff. Okay. Against that background, the prospect of launching a large-scale national plan was losing favor. They have developed this plan. And let's be honest, the plan that they're talking about is, I'm not convinced that, you and I and Matt and Brendan and Jamie could get into a room and we would come up with more or less the same plan, right? This is not rocket science. You need to like have you need to have accounting for this. You need to be able to turn these things around quickly. You need to develop some contact tracing. It's stuff that everybody's been saying. It's like, why haven't we been doing this? Well, they came up with this plan. Here's the plan. The plan called for the federal government to coordinate distribution of test kits so they could be surged to heavily affected areas, oversee a national contact tracing infrastructure. Very obvious stuff. Yes. You have a central clearinghouse in the federal government. They have the data to say like, oh, we're going to need this in Kentucky because we're starting to see, an uptick here, whatever it is. It also proposed lifting contract restrictions on where doctors and hospitals send tests, allowing any laboratory with capacity to test any sample. It proposed a massive scale up of antibody testing to facilitate a return to work. Called for mandating that all COVID-19 test results from any kind of testing taken anywhere be reported to a national repository as well to state and local health departments. So you could assess, like, are these tests accurate? Where, like everybody's got to share this information. And they wanted a national sentinel surveillance system, which would allow real-time capability to see where things are surging, right? This is all sort of like obvious stuff. But then the White House was like, we don't want to test. We're nervous about testing. So against that background of the White House being reluctant, the prospect of launching a large-scale national plan was losing favor, said one public health expert in frequent contact with the White House's official coronavirus task force. Most troubling of all, perhaps, was a sentiment the expert said a member of Kushner's team expressed, that because the virus had hit blue states hardest, a national plan was unnecessary and would not make sense politically. The political folks believed that because it was going to be relegated to Democratic states, that they could blame those governors and that would be an effective political strategy, said the expert. That's a quote. That logic may have swayed Kushner. Quote, it was very clear that Jared was ultimately the decision maker as to what plan was going to come out, the expert said. Just for context, to understand what that means, let's play this clip. I think you and I have played this clip multiple times from Pam Carlin when she was testifying in front of the Judiciary Committee that was looking into impeachment. Back, I guess, in maybe December or January. Here's Pam Carlin testifying, and this is what we're looking at.
What happened in 2016 was bad enough. There is widespread agreement that Russian operatives intervened to manipulate our political process. But that distortion is magnified if a sitting president abuses the powers of his office actually to invite foreign intervention. To see why, imagine living in a part of Louisiana or Texas that's prone to devastating hurricanes and flooding. What would you think if you lived there and your governor asked for a meeting with the president to discuss getting disaster aid that Congress has provided for? What would you think if that president said, I would like you to do us a favor. I'll meet with you. And I'll send the disaster relief once you brand my opponent a criminal. Wouldn't you know in your gut
right, that's it.
that
that's
such a president
that dynamic is what we're looking at, right? They're not going to provide a national testing strategy because they think this is hurting blue state governors. This is nuts.
It is nuts. And it's just, and by the way, it wasn't just the White House that was doing this. Remember Mitch McConnell at the time, they were talking about doing aid to states and cities. And one of his aides put out a whole plan. And I think McConnell actually, said this at some, function that he was at, that they weren't going to do a, quote, blue state bailout, meaning that, they weren't going to, they thought that the virus, these people were living in this dream world, I guess, where they thought that the virus was only going to attack Democrats. And that was good for them. So they didn't want to bail out any states. They didn't want to do testing in blue states. They didn't want to have a national response and, somehow make it look like this was a problem that they had some responsibility for. I mean, this was going on all through the spring. You can just see how that whole through line of these political considerations were happening. And what it depended on was a couple of things. You had Deborah Birx there. This was reported in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago. During that period that we're talking about, late March and early April, Deborah Birx was running around with this pie in the sky, optimistic model that was showing the virus was going away and it was going to go away. Now, this woman, she's the doctor. She was highly respected as a scientist. I don't know why she adopted this particular model. Nobody really knows, although I have my suspicions. And she was a quote, a member, happy to be a member of Trump's team. So maybe that tells you all you need to know. And she had an office in the West Wing, and she had access to everybody. And she was pushing out this idea that the virus was going away. You know, Trump didn't come up with this on his own. This is something that he heard. And I think we know where he heard it, that it was going to go away someday. And that her model at that time was this optimistic model. Remember, they're saying, oh, 60,000 deaths tops. That was coming from that particular model. And I won't go into why that was. I mean, there's a reason why that model was so optimistic and was really stupid. But, you know, in any case, that's what he wanted to hear, because he was desperate about the economy at the time, particularly the stock market. He was freaking out. He didn't want his numbers to go up. We know that, you know, gosh, you know, they're got to keep my numbers down. So there was that pressure coming from that as well. So they're saying you don't need to do a national testing because it's going away on its own. And you had this blue state political thing. So basically what we're talking about, and I think maybe this kind of crystallizes the entire Trump administration, not just the response to the COVID crisis. There are only two things that they are able to contemplate: punishing their enemies and magical thinking that problems are just going to go away. I mean, this is their entire approach to governing, and has been in every way. In terms of the COVID crisis, though, this really, the chickens came home to roost on this particular governing strategy of, you know, because obviously it doesn't work at all. The virus is a virus. It's not, you know, it's not subject to political considerations, and magical thinking has no effect on it. So they're stuck with this. And, you know, we're just seeing this again. It's as you point out, you know, look, you're still seeing this stupid argument over masks. I mean, I can't believe we're still doing that. It is beyond belief, but this has become some kind of political, you know, totem that, you know, it means something. If you don't wear a mask, I don't know, it makes you more of a man or more of a Republican, or I don't know, more of a hero in some way. And it's absolutely ridiculous that we're still arguing about that. And now the virus has surged so out of control. You know, it has this sort of surge where it goes up, and then, you know, it starts to peter out as people begin to behave, you know, in a responsible fashion for a while, and it goes down. But, you know, there's just the idea that this testing, you know, this national testing program, which I agree with you, who knows if it would have worked. I mean, this is the Trump administration after all, but even the attempt to do it probably would have been welcome. And I think they would have been seen. This is the part that absolutely astonishes me. They're so stupid about politics that Trump and his cronies did not understand the opportunity they were given to be heroes and to take control of the situation and be seen as these great managers. I mean, this was the whole argument for Trump, right? He's a businessman, you know, Kushner, a businessman. They know how to get things done and blah. They can get the private sector involved and they can do all this stuff. Had they actually done that, even if it wasn't entirely successful, the attempt to do that, the taking control in a positive way rather than, you know, like sending paramilitary troops into cities, taking control in a positive way and saying, look, we're going to get the full force of the federal government, you know, working in all capacities that we can. We'll bring in the private sector. We're going to do this. That he would have helped his reelection chances by doing the thing that he wanted. But because they can only see the politics in terms of punishing their enemies and demanding loyalty of their minions, that's all there is for them. They have no other way, no other window into the way politics works, because they're like, you know, small-minded mob bosses. They're like, you know, Tony Soprano. That they couldn't conceive of that, even in this moment where it could have been a moment of real success, or at least more successful than it's been. Let's put it that way.
Well, they could have projected that. I mean, I think look at what Andrew Cuomo has done. I mean, Andrew Cuomo made some massive, deadly mistakes. They sent patients to nursing homes, for God's sakes. And yet he was able to at least politically position himself to the point where, you know, most people, sadly, as much as I am trying to crack that veneer, perceive him as being successful during this. I mean, honestly, like, at one point you realize like, oh, I screwed up. And, but they have not let go of the idea that we're going to deny this reality exists at the White House. And so let me ask you this in terms of like, they supposedly have suspended their campaign ad buys, and there's a sense that they're going to retool. Who knows? Maybe tomorrow will be the day that Donald Trump finally becomes president. But give me your sense when you see, like when I see Fox News and when I see Bill Barr go up on the Hill and Donald Trump, we need to postpone the election. Now, granted, there was a lot of pushback, I suspect, because a lot of Republicans are like, hey, wait a second. We don't want more time here, because if the time between September and the election is longer, we could lose worse, I think, is probably what they're thinking. I mean, that honestly, like, I mean, time is not in their favor here because the economy, they just left town yesterday, the Republican Senate did, without dealing with extended unemployment. We're going to have millions of people, tens of millions of people who are going to be subject to eviction within weeks. We're going to have tens of millions of people who are going to suddenly feel a cut of $2,400 a month in what has been providing support for them because they don't have the ability to work. I mean, things are going to go south very quickly. And to add another month, let's say, I mean, all of this is fantastical, but to add another month to the election cycle, I think there's a lot of Republicans out there going like, no, we don't want that. I mean, and it suggests to me that maybe there's been a decision by the sort of like the Republican regulars that maybe it's time to start to distance ourselves a little bit from this and, think about how we can sabotage Joe Biden. You know what I mean? I mean, like, and I think from the Trump camp, it's more like, how can we just simply say this election's going to be illegitimate?
I agree with you. And I think the first point you made is particularly important. The Republicans it makes zero sense in any normal political, sense that they would not want to work very, very diligently to keep the economy functioning going into an election unless they know they're going to lose it. And basically are instead setting up they're sabotaging the next administration by destroying the economy even worse before the election. I can't think of any other reason why. I mean, we're sitting there with a Congress and a president, and Trump too, ready to sign checks to the American people to get them through the 3 months before the election. I mean, that's like in the old days, that would have been just manna from heaven, right? I mean, geez, the government's giving out money. Let's get some, right? Let's get some and do it. And then we're in the middle of this terrible crisis, and they know that people are going to be suffering, evicted, as you say, losing. I mean, they're already lining up for food banks. What's it going to be like in October if this aid is not continued? So it's definitely, that's again another political decision based purely on sort of a punitive, petty, vindictive sort of measure, and that's being done by the Republicans in Congress. They're the ones who are doing this. This isn't even Trump. I think he's so out of it. I think he'll sign whatever they give him. But, so this is what's happening. And I think that's the motivation for them not to want to extend the election, and also trying to, preserve some vestige of deniability that they were totally in the tank for Trump. I mean, the head of the Federalist Society said that it was fascistic and Trump should be impeached in the New York Times yesterday. So that was something of a shot across the bow. But don't kid yourself. There's a second part of this, which is what Trump concentrated on when they asked him about it yesterday in his coronavirus, rally briefing at the White House. He ignored the delay the election part and went directly to, I don't think the election's legitimate if we don't count all the votes on election night. and really attacked mail-in voting. And, we're seeing them. There was a story yesterday that it's a Trump crony that's in charge of the post office.
Yep.
And he's now instituting all these new rules that are delaying, just normal mail and packages, much less this, great surge of mail that's going to come with the election, which seems obvious. This is just obvious what they're doing. And I know that this is true because my mail has been delayed. I've actually seen this happen. I was wondering, I'm going, what is going on here? Because they've usually been pretty good. It's all tracked, on computers, and you can usually figure out where your packages are and stuff. And suddenly the whole thing's gone kerflooey just in the last couple of weeks. So it's obvious to me that this is what's happening. He cut overtime pay. He cut all these methods that they were using to get the mail on time for an obvious reason. So I think it's clear.
I should add, let me just add one thing.
Now, I don't know where.
Let me just add one thing on that. What they have also done is it used to be that before you went out on your route, they would process some mail. They won't do that now. They've changed that. And there's a lot of self-sabotage going on at the post office, like you say, and there's, I think, a lot of this has been ongoing, right? I mean, this has been an ongoing Republican project since 2006, where they passed the law that basically said the post office, unlike any other entity in existence in the country, government agency, quasi-government agency, private enterprise, they had to pre-fund the retirement benefits 75 years out. That means for people who are not even remotely born yet, they had to pre-fund their retirement benefits as a way of making of crippling the post office, and they're getting gosh darn close to it. Of the many things that will happen if Trump is reelected, the post office, a huge swath of it will be privatized, without a doubt. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And, no. And just to sort of put a, make a point of it, that this, what you said about what they're attempting to do with the election, I think we're at a point where, I heard guys like Byron York yesterday, to some of these right wingers, they were saying, oh no, we can't delay the election, but let's not kid ourselves. The election's going to be rigged. That is the line that Trump is using. He used it the last time, remember? I mean, he was saying he wouldn't accept the election results unless he won back in 2016. And this time he's got this whole thing set up. So basically what he is setting up is a way of invalidating the election results, regardless of how big the loss is. And I mean, that is really amazing to me because, you expect that they would do it in a close election, but this one's starting to look like it might not be that close, where they really can't contest it in any normal legal way, right? There's not going to be these small differences in places like Pennsylvania and Michigan and, Wisconsin and that.
Knock on wood.
It could be a pretty big win, knock on wood, but the polls show that it could be. And so they're setting up, just in case that happens and it's not close, that they're going to have this argument. And and when you combine that with Bill Barr saying in his insane appearance before the House Judiciary Committee this week, that he will, quote, follow the law, but he'll leave office if the results are clear. And his insistence that sending paramilitaries in to protect federal buildings and federal law, et cetera, kind of assuming a whole lot of different, of jurisdiction that he doesn't actually have, and ignoring jurisdictions that he does have. This could be I think that, I don't know if Trump's going to refuse to leave office, but I can almost guarantee that from November 4th until he leaves office is going to be a nightmare in this country, because I just cannot see that even if he concedes, that he really concedes, that this is, and certainly his people, the Boogaloo boys and God knows the Proud Boys and the militias and God knows what else, the people on their boats and the Hell's Angels and God knows what else. I mean, these are all heavily armed people. And now you've got, paramilitaries that are working on behalf of him, that on an official basis. That I think that there will be a large number of Americans who will not accept the result. Whether Donald Trump accepts it or not, I don't know, but I can guarantee that there's going to be millions of Americans who won't accept it after listening to this drivel for the last few months, and it's going to continue. And you're right about the advertising. They pulled the advertising because of, quote, messaging. I am really wondering what the new messaging is going to be, but I have a feeling this could be it. That, the election's rigged, it's not right, our system is broken, you can't trust anything, et cetera, et cetera. So, here we are.
We're going to find out, I think, in a couple of days. We're going to get a sense of which way they're going to go with this. And I think you're right. I mean, this is, I think there is a sense that they feel they are cornered. And this is the only direction they can move in. We will see. Heather, as always, disturbing and a pleasure. I don't know.
Pleasurably disturbing.
Well, I don't know if I would say that, but I'm glad we had the opportunity. Digby, thanks again.
My pleasure. Have a great weekend.
All right. Bye-bye. You too. All right. We're going to, we take a break or
I can just bring David on, actually.
Oh, is he on? Do we have him?
Here we go.
Okay.
Here in a second.
Yeah, we have him connecting. Just oh, look at that. Wow, he's got a very very sophisticated setup. Ladies and gentlemen, David Feldman, I see that you're connecting to audio. I don't know that we hear you. You don't hear us. He's just shaking his head back and forth.
Yeah, it looks like his audio won't connect. That's weird.
Yeah, his audio is not connecting. There he is. We get an opportunity to see what David Feldman looks like.
Like a webcam.
As he is being subjected to technical difficulties. He's just hanging. It's just like a logo that says David Feldman is connecting to audio. He's not talking. He cannot
Can you hear
us.
us?
No, he cannot. Shoot. David, how many fingers am I holding up? How many fingers am I holding up? Can you tell me? How many fingers?
Oh, shoot.
Can you like text him or IM him or call him on the phone to maybe drop him and rejoin?
Let's see here.
Why don't you drop him and see if he can rejoin again? Maybe he's going to go through it. Okay. Good job, David. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. In the meantime, Eric Weinstein, I see, Matt, that you've pointed out the tweet. You've been trained not to listen to Cernovich. Now ask why.
Yeah.
I believe in redemption, and Mike Cernovich has been fighting under incredible odds. This is the first step. Next is asking, why are these names redacted? Is this an issue of national security? If so, was Jeffrey Epstein in IC?
I mean, there's a more pertinent connection to him in the intelligence community, which is that Acosta was told he was intelligence community and to lay off the case. So maybe if Weinstein went to better sources for this sort of stuff than Mike Cernovich, he would know that sort of stuff.
Right. I have a lot of reasons why people do not. Why I've been training people not to listen to Mike Cernovich.
Yeah, TrueAnon is a better source if people want to follow this stuff.
Exactly. So are we going to try and get David back?
Yeah. Let's see here. Let's try one more time. I'm going to DM.
There he is. Oh, look at that. Yeah. Can we record this? Oh, we are recording, right?
I'm spotlighting you. So.
Oh, no. I want to see that. No, do not spotlight me. I want to see him trying to. David, can you hear me?
Damn. No.
He's not hitting the right button.
Yeah. Can you select your mic, David?
David, can you hear us? Can you hear us?
No, shoot.
Can you hear us? Give me the thumbs up if you can hear us.
Damn it.
All right, let's just call on the phone. Brendan, can you call him and tell him to call on the phone?
Okay, I'll put him in the waiting room again.
Oh,
I was
my
on
God.
his show yesterday over Zoom, and it was pretty seamless. So
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, no, it's fine when you do his show. But when he wants to come on to should we just play a video in the meantime? We wait for people are getting a little bit annoyed, I would imagine. I certainly am. Well, here's Donald Trump. Brendan, can we do this? Can we play this, or are you able to?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, let's play clip number 2, and then we'll have Feldman call in on the phone system, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's play clip number 2. This is Donald Trump saying that he really doesn't want to wait for election results. That's too hard on him. Right now, I will say this, that I would imagine news organizations, cable television news, trying to figure out how they're going to handle this, because there's a lot of reason to believe that we're not going to get the results of an election until days later. And I can tell you, I've been through one of these back in 2020. It is the year 2000. It's a nightmare, and it makes things very unstable and potentially, it makes the outcome very, very unpredictable, because narratives get built, and then maybe Supreme Courts decide that they're going to interfere in one way or another. But here's Donald Trump.
An election. I'd love to see voter ID, but this is the opposite of voter ID. The Democrats love it. The Republicans hate it. We all agree that absentee voting is good. Mail-in ballots will lead to the greatest fraud. You know, we talk about Russia, Russia, Russia for 2.5 years, and then they found nothing, and there was nothing. But they talk Russia, Russia, Russia. They talk China. They talk all of these countries. They say they get involved in our elections. This is easy. You can forge ballots. This is much easier for foreign countries. Go ahead, Steve.
But delay in the election is probably a non-starter. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I just feel I don't want to delay. I want to have the election. But I also don't want to have to wait for 3 months and then find out that the ballots are all missing and the election doesn't mean anything. That's what's going to happen, Steve. That's common sense. And everyone knows it. Smart people know it. Stupid people may not know it. And some people don't want to talk about it.
Oh, my God.
But they know it. And no, we want to have an election where people actually go in and what's your name? My name is so-and-so. Boom, you signed the book like I've been doing for years. It's very, very unfair to our country. If they do this, our country will be a laughingstock all over the world because everyone knows it doesn't work.
Who's going to tell them? Who's going to tell them about the whole laughingstock thing?
It's pretty amazing that it's going to be common sense that we won't be able to hold an election is like something you can say as president that is a defense of how you should remain president.
Yeah, and like who's the they here? Like, who's the they that is doing this? Right? Like, who's the they? But what first off, Russia. Well, all of the investigations, including the Republican-led Intelligence Committee, said that Russia interfered in the 2016 election. I don't know if it was determinative or not. There's a lot of things that led to Clinton losing, and about 15 out of the 16 had to do with her campaign, or maybe some of them are out of her control. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But the Russia thing was a finding by the Republican Senate Intelligence Committee. Let's just make that clear. But the idea of it being common sense that it's going to be possible for Russia or anybody else to fraudulently submit these ballots is absurd. We've already talked about that. I mean, here's a guy who's laying the premise for his followers that the election is going to be illegitimate. That is all that's going on there. Period. End of story. Nothing else. I mean, this is, like we have a knee-jerk reaction of like, let's assess this like we are sane, relatively rational, intelligent people and assess it based upon how ridiculous it sounds. I think that's a mistake. I really do. I think it's like people have to move into the mode of like, he's doing something consciously now with that. He knows what he's doing. And he is laying the groundwork. It may be crazy, but he is laying the groundwork to say the results of this election are suspect.
Yeah, and
Period.
it doesn't have to be across, the entire, country. It just has to be a few counties in states where Mitch McConnell has appointed, X number of conservative judges and run it up the ladder of the judiciary.
Exactly. I mean, it is, it is the case that if, they lose Texas and, Arizona and Florida and Ohio, okay, it's going to be much harder to argue. But if it's even, if it's one of those things where there's like 2 or 3 states, people just better just like mentally start to prepare for this stuff. All right. And hopefully we are also mentally prepared to welcome to the program the proprietor of the David Feldman program. That would be David Feldman. David, are you on the line?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I don't know why you were having problems before, but it was fun to watch.
Yes. A man of my youth still being able to figure out how to work Zoom. You seem pissed off today. You kind of negative. Is it okay if can you use a little healthy criticism?
Sure. I mean, if you feel like that's how you want to start this off, go ahead.
And this comes from a place of love. I mean, you just seem angry, and I'm not sure it's good for the country. I think you need to tell people you're kind, Sam. I think it's important to remind your viewers, your listeners, that you have a big heart and that you're kind, and never squander an opportunity when you're on the show to tell people you're kind, because there are a lot of frightened people right now. You were talking about evictions, homelessness, a cratering economy. Sam, you need to remind people now more than ever that Sam Cedar is kind. You need to dance more, play more games on the show, play more games, dance more, and tell everyone you're kind. We need that.
I see what you're saying. I think, I mean, okay. I'm kind, and I will try and be more fun. I mean, you sound like you're describing, someone like, I don't know. I mean, let me ask you this.
Yeah, I listen. Can I just say up front before we get into it, because it's so important, and your listeners, they do, they take the cues from you.
Mm-hmm.
Tell everyone you're kind, even strangers. Walk up to a stranger today and say, "Hi, I'm kind." You'll feel so much better. That's my message to all your followers. Tell everyone you're kind.
But don't you think that maybe being kind is probably better than just saying that I'm kind?
I don't understand what you're saying, and I don't understand what that means. Be optimistic too. I'm optimistic. I'm very happy with what's going on. I see nothing but blue skies. And today, I watched waiting, and you're just kind of nitpicking.
I'm nitpicking. Well, and, which part was nitpicking?
You're nitpicking.
I'm nitpicking. Like I did because of the unemployment stuff. That was nitpicky, and the stuff,
GDP,
the GDP, and the denying of the testing because it was happening in blue states.
Look, Have you ever been in a bad relationship where the
Yes.
person wants to get out and they're like a coiled snake in the grass, just waiting for you to make one little mistake and then jump on it? That's what I feel you're doing with the situation here.
Well, I mean, I guess we may have to agree to disagree. Well, let me ask you this, okay? This week we saw the passing of Herman Cain. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
I'm optimistic.
I'm not sure I follow. You're optimistic about what? I mean, he passed away.
Well, I mean, I heard your interview with Digby. Herman Cain, he died. He accepted the results. He didn't say it was rigged. He died, and he accepted it.
Well, I mean,
why can't you know?
How
he's
could
a
he?
Republican, and he accepted that he's dead.
That's true.
And I think all the Republicans have accepted that he's dead. And you're talking about rigging, refusal to deal with science and all this negativity. Nobody's saying Herman Cain isn't dead. And so this is a good thing. It's sad that he's died, but I think Herman's death will serve as a wake-up call for Republicans like Herman Cain. I think they're all going to admit that the science is there and that, you can't gather in public places not wearing a mask. I think Herman Cain learned his lesson. I think he has the introspection to say, you know what? I was wrong. I didn't wear a mask. Now I'm dead. From now on, I wear a mask. I think people like Herman Cain can be moved to say, I'm dead, I'll wear a mask. And unlike you, Sam, I think that's good for the country. I'm not a Republican. I'm not. But I think they are capable of introspection.
Well, no, wait a second. Now, wait a second. I got to take a little issue because I find it hard to believe that Herman Cain is going to be introspective now that he's dead, A. And B, I would say that Louis Gohmert, who was also diagnosed with COVID this week, was anything but introspective. In fact, he not only did not reassess his decision, his attitude towards masks, he started to blame masks for maybe why he got it.
Okay. All right. Look, again, you need to dial it back. I find your tone of voice a little menacing and threatening, and I don't feel safe. That's the first thing I want to say. That I do want to have a conversation with you about politics, but you really need to dial back the subtext of this conversation. Okay, there is a subtext to this conversation that I find a little disconcerting. Okay, I think
there's multiple subtexts of this conversation that I'm finding disconcerting. To be frank.
Okay. You know that I'm a Bernie supporter, right?
Of course. Yes.
That.
No, I know.
From way back.
From
where I was there. Okay, but you have to reach across the aisle, and you got to pass legislation. You talk about pragmatism. And you have to, Louis Gohmert, I don't know where you stand politically. I'm sure you and he don't see eye to eye on everything. But you have to admit, he loves this country just as much as I hate it. So that makes him a true patriot. Louis Gohmert loves America as much as I loathe it. And that's a lot. And for you to attack and make fun of Louis Gohmert, I know you're kind. Where, he got the cut. Hey, he's an inspiration to even lefties like me. Louis Gohmert, how many of your friends, how many people do you know can be kicked in the head by a mule while still in his mother's womb, get born, get kicked in the head by that same mule again and again and again, and grow up to become a United States congressman? Louis Gohmert is an inspiration to all Americans who keep getting kicked in the head by a mule, and for you to giggle over his health, I mean, it's just unseemly, and that's not how you pass the important legislation that that we need right now at a time like this. We need kind legislation. We need dancing and games and gifts, giveaways, and dancing and kindness. That's what we need.
Well, no, wait a second, David. I need to take a little issue here. First off, I have not giggled about Louis Gohmert. I mean, I've laughed. I have. I guess I've laughed. I guess I've full on laughed. I haven't quite giggled. But nevertheless, also, we don't need Louis Gohmert to pass any legislation. He is a member of the House. The House has a majority of Democrats. The House has passed many, I think maybe over 100 pieces of legislation, well into the, I'm not sure, but at least dozens of pieces of legislation without Louis Gohmert voting for a single one of those bills. Now, they all died in the Senate, but Louis Gohmert's not in the Senate. So you're wrong on both points.
And do you laugh when those bills die in the Senate? Do you mock those deaths as well? The way you mock the deaths of Republicans?
I mean,
look.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. I think
let the anger out. Let the anger out.
I think, like, frankly, I think there's reason for anger to be here, and I'm curious as to how you maintain this sort of like even keel.
Because the sun shines on me. Chris Matthews always talked about certain political types who always seem to walk in the sun, and I have a sunny disposition, and I'm not as smart as you. I'm just a small town country Jew. And, we have to listen. We have to listen to the other side. Louis Gohmert.
David, where did you grow up?
In a small town, very small town.
Very
small town.
What was the name of the place that you grew up?
It was a small town, Greenwich, Connecticut. I had to share a floor with my maid. Are we allowed to call them maids? But it was, I know what these people go through because I lived on the third floor with my maid, and
you were in the
next to hers.
maid quarters wing of the house.
Yeah,
okay.
And my bathroom was right up against hers.
Right.
And, so I know, anyway, that's not the point, Sam. Louis Gohmert, we need to listen to the other side. And he said something interesting about his COVID-19. He blamed his COVID-19 on what?
Masks.
Do you even listen?
Yes,
huh?
Masks.
Good for you. See, now, I didn't think somebody like you was capable of listening to the other side. That's how you that's bipartisan. And, I'm not a scientist, so I should talk about this. I have noticed. Now, do you have a pen? Maybe you could.
I do.
Maybe you could learn something. Okay. Write this down and do the math. Louis Gohmert says he got the COVID-19 from the mask.
Mm-hmm.
You read. You see what's going on. Have you noticed that the more you see people wearing masks, the more of a spike you see in COVID-19? Do you understand cause and relationship?
I do. I don't think that's exactly what you're talking about.
Everyone is wearing a mask, even the president. And what happens? More COVID-19.
Right. I don't think that's the sequence I don't think you've got the sequence correct, David. But I listen, I don't want to haggle over this. One of the things I actually wanted to talk about was in light of, Louis Gohmert apparently not telling his staff that he had COVID, in light of the fact that the Robert O'Brien, I think it is, the national security advisor, not telling his staff that he had it. I've got to say that I've heard of similar dynamics around the David Feldman show. Now, this was not something I was going to get into because I didn't want to get into a hostile, disposition with you, but you seem to sense that there is one anyways, so I thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think I was going to be ambushed on your show. I thought this was good. Boy, you really do. I don't know what's going on over there, but you are, about 24 former employees who range from long-time senior level executives on my show to production assistants to the kids I keep in cages. They have stepped forward to imply that there's a toxic work environment on my show, and I'm listening. I'm listening. I am listening to them. I think it's important to listen,
I mean, how much are you taking this to heart? I mean, you're listening, but are you will you share with us exactly what they're talking about in terms of this?
I rather not.
Well, no, I know you would rather not.
I wouldn't ask you.
I got to be honest with you. Nobody has made such complaints.
Yeah, I know, but I heard something happened on your show that I'm not asking about, but
like what?
I don't know. People were crying. I don't really know. A lot of crying, a lot of weeping going on at your show.
Yeah,
deep crying, sad. But I don't ask. It's none of my business.
Right.
Going on.
Well,
but very sad, crying people.
You
stop for about 10 days.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about me. I've been accused of being handsy. And now I'm of a generation. I'm older than you, and so maybe I am handsy. Looking back at and I'm listening at my behavior, I now realize perhaps I'm handsy. It's sneaking up behind one of my employees and wrapping my fingers around his or her neck and constricting the flow of oxygen to their brain because they were wearing sneakers to the office. I now, in retrospect, realize that could be misconstrued as handsy, and I'm listening.
And what are you going to do about it? I mean, what you're describing is you're attempting to choke one of your employees.
No, handsy. That is being. Hang on, choke. See?
Well, you're being chokesy. You're being a little bit chokesy, if you will.
Chokesy.
Yeah.
You're accusing me of being chokesy. My generation, I'm older than you, we call it handsy. And when you say chokesy, I take offense because there was never anything sexual in nature when I did that. There was nothing. It was handsy, not chokesy. There was nothing sexual in that. And I hate the implication. I think you've crossed a line with me to say that was purely intended to restrict the flow of oxygen to the brain so that they would get the message not to wear sneakers to the office. And for you to say that that's chokesy,
I mean,
Jesus.
It's almost like definitionally chokesy. I'm curious as to if that's not chokesy, what would be considered chokesy in your mind?
Because I was not aroused by this. If it were chokesy, there would be, flowers sent afterwards and money exchanged.
Right.
This was purely about enforcing workplace dress codes. No sneakers in the office. Now, if that, looking back, I am listening, and I'm going to, reevaluate how I interact with the people who make eye contact with me, even though they've been told specifically, don't look at me in the eyes. I don't know why that's so hard for people who you pay to understand, don't look at me in the eyes, or go home and take a shower, or have a breath mint. And these are things that, in order for me to be an artist, and I'm kind. You know that I'm kind.
Well,
right?
you've said that.
Yeah. How am I going to be kind if people are looking at me in the eyes?
David, let me ask you this. You say that you have listened and you are contemplating, like, what do you think you're going to do differently now? I mean,
I think.
are you going to continue to restrict the ability for people to get oxygen to their brains if they are not wearing the proper footwear?
Okay, now I feel you're trivializing my identity and my struggle. That question is really, I've been through a lot, and I've been brave. And for you to ask that kind of question just dismisses decades of my work with my identity. And I really think you've crossed a line here. I mean, I came on, and you're just looking to humiliate me. And why would you bring up my identity?
I'm afraid I don't think I did, David.
Oh, now you're erasing my identity.
I'm
now
not.
You're just saying my. Oh, okay, I get it. Now you've just erased all memory of my identity. Okay, fine. You've revealed who you are, Sam, and it says a lot.
But by referencing your identity, is it because I used your name when I addressed you? Would you feel better if I asked that question without saying David?
I think you need to look in the mirror and question some of your preconceived notions about my identity.
Well, I'll just call you. Do you want me? Would you prefer if I just called you Feldman?
There you go. Okay, fine. Moving on. Let's change the subject, Sam, because I think you're digging a hole.
All right.
I think
you want to change the subject?
And if you dig any deeper, you're going to strike a sweatshop in China. If you dig any deeper.
I'm going to ignore that comment. Were there things in the news this week, David, that you wanted to discuss beyond the fact that you think that, I don't know, that, you're dealing with your own accusations of trying to restrict the blood flow to people's brains because of their footwear? Is there Bill Barr? Have you been paying attention to the news?
Yes. And I think that people should limit their social gatherings to 50, unless you kind of think the other 20 are, clear. Wear a mask when you can. And, try not to share a joint with somebody. Stay at least, 5 inches away from strangers. And
are you social distancing? I mean, in the past, I've spoken to you. You said you were social distancing. Have you been social distancing?
I go to parties. I believe in freedom. I'm a people person. I'm a lefty, and we're social animals, and I just sometimes worry that the cure could be worse than the disease. So it's a balancing act, and I just people need to be smart. People need to be smart right now. We need to think and stay 6 inches away from strangers. And don't spit in other people's mouths. That whole thing where we used to walk up to people and say, "Hi, how are you?" I find handshakes are much safer in this age of COVID. I don't know. In my culture, I've abandoned some of my.
I
my
do
habits.
recall that was your sort of methodology. But the spitting thing is a cultural thing, and maybe you should be a little more sensitive.
I have told the people in my culture that yes, it's a sign of affection to when you see somebody, especially somebody you don't know, to spit in their mouth. And I've told the people of my identity to go to shaking hands, to learn how to shake hands.
Would you be more specific on your identity? I'm curious as to.
Oh my God, that is a question. I think that is a question that is inappropriate to ask what my identity is. I mean, you've crossed the line there. I have an identity, and I want it respected, and I want you to be fearful around me and watch every word you say.
Well, I do that anyways, David. I also am nervous about the spitting, frankly, when I'm around you, to be honest.
But that's a cultural. So you don't respect my culture.
No, I do respect your culture. I just don't want your saliva in my mouth.
But that's what we do. And we are dialing it back. But if you tell me that you're offended by it or you think that it's not right, then I feel that maybe I should go back to spitting in people's mouths to make a statement so my culture doesn't get erased.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, David,
I think you need to think a lot about how you interact with people like me.
Yeah.
And I think you need to listen. I think you need to listen and be optimistic and kind. Tell people you're kind.
I will. I'm going to tell people I'm kind. I am going to definitely give some serious thought about interacting with you. I can promise you that.
Okay.
Serious thought.
All right.
Well,
I
David,
did it. Thank you. You know what? In all seriousness, I'm being serious now. I didn't know whether or not I could come back. I'm being David Feldman now.
Okay.
But, yeah. In all seriousness, I have never, ever, since I've been doing my show, I was getting emails about him, and it was unbelievable. And I just, in all seriousness, I want to thank you for introducing me to him. And I wouldn't have been able to. Anyway, thank you.
well, I can tell you that I don't know if we have have had a guest on that Michael got more excited about. Having on than probably a couple, but certainly you were up there.
Yeah, last time I said I am not going to bail on the bit. I'm going to commit to it. Well,
you got all the way through it. You got all the way through it.
Yeah, I got all. You deserve credit for introducing him to me, and thank you for that.
Well, yes, I will. Will take credit for introducing you two. But like I say, he.
Okay.
All right. Well, Dave,
can I see my you're keeping one of my kids? Do I get to ever see my 24-year-old daughter? Or is that just?
I don't know what you're talking about now.
When does this end? When do I get I'd like to see my daughter.
Well,
she's 24.
I am not responsible for what the authorities have decided in regards to your children, David. I'm not.
Okay, but you have a big mouth. That's all I'm saying.
David Feldman, always a pleasure, man. I'll talk to you soon.
I want to see my kids.
Goodbye, David.
Why can't you keep your mouth shut, Sam?
Goodbye, David. I'm sorry. I just, sometimes you see some atrocities that are going on. David Feldman, ladies and gentlemen. Check out the David Feldman.
No, and remember, nobody likes a snitch.
Right. I know that. I've been told that. I'm sorry. Sometimes you got to sometimes you got to be a mandatory reporter. Goodbye, David. Thank you very much. I appreciate the call. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. David Feldman. David Feldman. All right. We're going to take a quick break and head into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes the show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, don't forget to support justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Get our merch. Sign up listen to the AM Quickie every day, 6-7 minutes. You can find it on YouTube at youtube.com/Majority Report Live. You can find it on any of your podcast streaming devices. You can find it on our app at majorityapp.com. I want to remind you, too, that Blinkist takes the key insights from over 3,000 nonfiction bestsellers in over 27 categories and condenses them down into blinks, which you can read or listen to in just 15 minutes. Blinkist also offers its members exclusive original podcasts from top authors and creative thinkers. Go to Blinkist.com/Majority Report. Start your 7-day free trial and get 25% off a Blinkist premium membership after you realize you need to have this service. You get up to 65% off of audiobooks, yours to keep forever. Check that out. Don't forget, you can find Nomiki's show on youtube.com, The Nomiki Show, or you can find it on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. She did a wonderful tribute to Michael this week with Anna Kasparian. Also, check out the Antifada. Jamie's got a lot of different things in that feed this week. Matt, what's happening on Literary Hangover? And you guys are taking a couple of weeks from TMBS, right? And going to start that up again soon?
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be reforming here a little bit for a couple of weeks. Literary Hangover, I'm probably going to get on Twitch, twitch.tv/Literary Hangover. Probably going to get on this weekend to stream for the first time after a while. So subscribe to that, folks. That's where I'll be.
Okay, great. We're going to take
Looks like Jamie is actually just here if she wants to do things.
Yeah, Jamie, what's happening on the Antifada this week?
Hey, guys. So this week on the Antifada, we have an interview with Wilfred Chan, a contributing writer to The Nation, as well as the Lausan Collective, about the ongoing uprisings and struggles for democracy and democratic rights in Hong Kong. And we thought it was really important to do this episode because it's anytime you have like a quarter of the population out in the streets fighting militarized police, I'd like to understand why they're doing that. So we went over some of the history of Hong Kong as a colonial subject of Britain, as well as the role that Hong Kong has played since being handed over to China. We talk about the various things that set the stage for the umbrella movement and for the uprisings that we're seeing there now. And some of the contradictions involved in this movement, because there are reactionary elements and there are also leftist elements as well. And it has liberatory potential, I believe. So that's up now. Check it out, patreon.com/The Antifada. Also, I would encourage people to check out our episode from last week, especially if you're having issues with your landlord or your housing situation, because we had some very practical tips, as well as, broader political and economic analysis of the housing crisis and the struggle to organize for tenants' rights with our friend Nate post Cyborg. So that's up too. Check it out. Patreon.com/The Antifada.
Okay, quick break into the fun half, 646-257-3920. Or you can IM us on the app. We'll be right back after this.
You are in for it. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are...
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them.
Almost says what? Almost says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on. Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report. Yeah, I'm very excited. Very excited. So childish. How's my backdrop look?
Oh, it looks pretty good.
Oh, thank you.
Did you get a green screen too?
Yeah, I'm just like a child. I can't
You
believe how excited I was about that.
You couldn't get through a few seconds of...
Seconds, I was so excited. Whoa, what happened? I can't believe how excited I am about that.
Wow. Yeah. Little did you know, you didn't even have to lug all that IKEA furniture upstate with you.
Oh my God. The amount of work I've put into this, I can't even begin to tell you.
You should have talked to Tech Whiz Binder first.
Yeah, I should have. But I mean, this looks better, I think, a little bit, but not dramatically. That's for sure.
Yeah, it is funny when he like raises his arms a little and the sides of his hands disappear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he also that happens regardless. I don't know if you were aware of that, but here is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He is being questioned by Jim Clyburn on the House Select Subcommittee on Coronavirus Crisis. On the coronavirus crisis. Are we even is Fauci even in touch with the White House anymore? Is it such a bizarre situation we're in? And again, I think the real question is going to be, what is the next move by the Trump administration? Here is Anthony Fauci explaining why the United States response has been such a disaster. Now, look, there was always going to be you have a pandemic, there's always going to be problems. And even in Europe and different places, they're having to re-shut down. They're having a resurgence. There's a certain inevitability to this, but nowhere is it as bad as it is in the United States.
Can you help us understand why? While Europe has largely contained the virus, the United States has seen a continued rise in new cases.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The answer to that question is really somewhat complex, but I'll try maybe to very briefly go through what I believe are at least some of the factors that were involved. If you look at what happened in Europe when they shut down or locked down or went to shelter in place, however you want to describe it, they really did it to the tune of about 95+% of the country did that. When you actually look at what we did, even though we shut down, even though it created a great deal of difficulty, we really functionally shut down only about 50% in the sense of the totality of the country, which means when we reached our peak, as they did, they came down almost to a low baseline, as you've shown very clearly. But take a look at what happened to our baseline. We came up, down, and then we plateaued at about 20,000 cases a day. So we started off with a very difficult baseline of transmission that was going on at the time that we tried to open up the country. And when we opened up the country, what we saw, particularly most recently in the southern states, was an increase of cases to 20, 30, 40, 50, and a couple of weeks ago it was up to 70,000 per day, and now it's down between 50 and 60. And the reasons for that are complex. There were some states that...
Now, I just want to note one thing here. I've seen a breakdown of that last figure that he gave, that it went up to 70,000, it's down to 50, 60,000. It may very well be a coincidence. That dip back down to 50, 60,000, where it stabilized, happened almost exactly at the time that data no longer went directly to the CDC and went to the White House and DHHS. It also leveled off in red states. Blue states that were having outbreaks kept having a trajectory that was going up. Maybe that's a coincidence. Who knows? I just wanted to point that out. Continue.
Did very well, and there are some states that did not. And when I say did not, I mean, we put out, as Ranking Member Scalise mentioned, the guidelines of a gateway, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Some were followed very carefully and some were not.
Yeah. Scalise wearing his mask. Wasn't it? It was Scalise who said, I don't know what made me think of this when I see Scalise in that mask, but didn't he say, like, I'm like David Duke without the baggage, right?
Yeah, he's very sorry for saying that out loud in front of reporters.
You need to say that out loud. I mean, there you have it. I mean, Fauci's basically saying, like, we just didn't, I mean, look, there is no doubt that tens of thousands of people were going to die in the midst of a pandemic in this country. But the idea that we are now at 150,000 and we are not capable of testing in a timely manner, we have no capacity to trace in any way. We have no ability around the country to have any sense of security in opening schools. The idea that it is raging uncontrollably in certain areas of the country is a function of having a political party that was hell-bent on pretending it didn't exist, and that any plans to have a national response were quashed because there was a sense that this was only going to hit blue states. I mean, that's it. This is, and I will say the other thing that just sort of, like, broadly speaking, that would have made this a lot easier to respond, although we could have had, let me put it this way. In a sane, rational country, had we had some type of social infrastructure that made it less onerous to have people stay at home and not work, to provide health care for people, and answer the question of, like, how are you going to pay for that test? If we had had a pre-existing infrastructure in this country, a social infrastructure that supported people, things would have been a little bit easier. But even if we did, and we had this administration, who was denying the reality of a pandemic, we would still be more or less just as effed. The next wave of immiseration that we're going to have is going to speak more to the fact that we have a country that doesn't have a system to support its people, essentially.
Yeah, and we also don't have networks of grassroots power or mutual aid in the way that a lot of other places do, right? Like Hong Kong, their local government was not great at the virus response at first. And then they quickly changed their tune due to a massive upswell of resistance from people utilizing connections that they made in the uprisings. So there are multiple reasons and there are multiple routes to this. But I would hope, I know that American protesters and leftists are focused on this issue. I just wish that we had more power right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big problem. And I hope, knock on wood, Joe Biden will be president and there'll be it's going to be an incentive for people to get even more involved with protesting and pressuring because of the higher percentage of chance that it's going to have an impact. I mean, we'll see. We'll see what kind of impact it has, but we need to be doing it regardless, certainly. Here's a protester in Portland, Oregon, who's describing the sort of dynamic that has gone on with the feds. I guess his name is Max Smith, and this is coming from Eric Gudas on Twitter. Listen to how this guy recounts what's happened in Portland.
And what's your take on the federal presence here? Do you think it's detracted from the overall message?
Yeah, it's definitely detracting, but I think it's intended to detract. For us on the ground who are always here, it doesn't really make a difference. They act the same as the cops did. They're a little bit more aggressive. We came out here dressed in T-shirts and doing hula hoops and stuff, and they started gassing us. So we came back with respirators, and they started shooting us. So we came back with vests, and they started aiming for the head. So we started wearing helmets. And now they call us terrorists. Who's escalating this? It's not us.
I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, nobody's suggesting that we shouldn't have protesters. Nobody's, concerned because the protesters are going around with hula hoops. We now know that the first set of violence was a function of a white supremacist in Minnesota smashing those windows. And the cops were just sort of waiting for any excuse, it appears. And so if you're not going to say that there shouldn't be any protest here, you then have to say, like, well, how come this has spiraled? What is driving the violence? And it has been across the country. It's been the police response. Local in some instances, but federal in Portland now. For the most part, local police departments. And when they back off, if things die down, at least in terms of the violence. But nobody out there, you need to be able to suggest there should be no protest to say that these protesters are responsible for the violence because they're just responding.
A good sort of rundown of the chronology here and the escalations and, what actually is going on in terms of, because there is, protest that does do small amounts of property damage. But if you follow Robert Evans of Bellingcat's chronology here, which is really well done, I highly recommend people check it out. It is just clear pattern of escalation by the state forces.
Oh my gosh. And think about the small amount of, whatever it is, vandalism or whatever you want to call it that exists in the context of one of these protests at the beginning relative to like when, I don't know, the Bruins win the championship, the cup.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or some football team wins their division championship. I mean, come on, give me a break.
Yeah. I mean, I think we do need to be careful, right? Because yes, some of the violence, first of all, it's not violence to smash the window of a bank. It's not violence to attack inanimate objects like buildings, especially when those buildings are symbols of the forces oppressing us, like the police, the banks, even luxury goods stores, right? But that said, not all of the escalation has been due to the cops. Certainly, they've done a whole lot of it, and they have inflamed things, and they have just given us so many examples of the reasons why we're protesting the cops in the first place. But I think like the real cause of the militancy and the riots that we've seen, we always have to direct the blame back to the system. That's what's causing it. It's not like there was no violence before and all of a sudden protesters just started rioting and looting, right? It was a response to pre-existing violence that exists.
Yeah, people are protesting against real things, real forces that are impacting people every day of their lives.
I mean, yeah, on top of the extreme police repression, you have 30 million Americans hungry last week, right? Like,
yeah, is that not violent?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But certainly the people on the wrong side of this have been more violent. I mean, to date, I don't think a single anarchist has killed a police officer, right? However, plenty of protesters have been harmed and in some cases killed by white supremacists.
Well, the statistics I heard was Antifa has not killed since you can keep records on it. Yeah, I think, is that what you're talking about?
Oh, yeah, I was talking about that. And then I pivoted because I was thinking back to like the 1920s and the shall we say, propaganda.
Yeah, I mean, there's some anarchists that did. Yeah, exactly. There's some anarchists that did some stuff.
Some anarchists did something, but
as of late.
Not recently. Certainly not since the rise of Antifa as a thing.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 412 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Ryan from Pittsburgh.
Ryan from Pittsburgh. What's on your mind?
So you guys mentioned the coup in Bolivia in the opening, and friend of the show, Yasha Monk, he made that persuasion thing, and I decided to subscribe to it because it's just a hate read it.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. You're breaking up. I don't know if it's you or me, but
yeah. What's your point about persuasion in Bolivia?
It's the Yasha Monk thing. Have you seen this?
No.
Yeah. Yasha Monk has a new side project. It's called Persuasion, with a whole bunch of the usual types of.
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay, yes.
Well, as you guys probably know, the basis for the removing Morales was the OAS report, which turned out to be really inaccurate. And I thought it was.
And we should say, I just want to be clear about this. Not only did the AOS report turn out to be inaccurate, there was plenty of mainstream reporting about that fact 4 months, 5 months after, well, I don't know. I've lost track of time. Maybe 6 months after Morales is ousted in a military coup.
Yeah, I think he was ousted in November, and then the New York Times said that it turned out to be inaccurate in June or something. But
okay, 8 months.
He was a big supporter of the coup, and he recently wrote for his publication Persuasion a new article titled "Stand Up for the Wrongly Accused," and I wanted you guys to guess what it's about.
Is it about him? People complaining about him supporting a coup?
Nope. It's another cancel culture article, and I just thought that was funny. he mentions Orwell, so I thought Matt might be interested in this because
they always Orwell is this guy who said
reference, but that was the one thing. And then there's one more thing.
New rule.
Did you guys see the
you do
Mike
not get to
Jeffrey Epstein thing?
What's the Cernovich Jeffrey Epstein thing?
A bunch of documents got released.
Yeah, I saw those documents. And did they come from Cernovich?
He's pouring through them.
I guess he did some he did some reporting, I guess, quote unquote, about Epstein, and then I think I just saw a tweet from TrueAnon Pod that he was like hanging out with them or something like that.
Yeah, there's this. It's kind of a complicated story. I mean,
Did Epstein hire or no? It didn't.
There was an allegation that Cernovich was working with Dershowitz to try to unseal things in a way that would be helpful for the defendants and not helpful to the accusers. And now it appears that Cernovich is trying to make it look like he's the real Epstein reporter and he's embarrassed Dershowitz somehow. But I don't buy it. I think he's a plant.
No, of course not.
I would need to see a little bit more of that. I know that that some of the stuff was just sealed again, or at least there was an appeal to the release of things. I don't know. I got to dig into that a little bit more, but I have no idea what Cernovich is doing. But yes, I do not believe that Mike Cernovich has redeemed himself in any way. The guy is a professional liar, and I would not trust anything that he's doing that doesn't have,
because you like to cancel people forever.
Right. I mean, it doesn't mean that he's not going to come out with something that isn't true in one instance, but I would be very, very hesitant to assume that what he is doing is would be consistent in that manner. Let's put it that way. If he finds that he needs to release something that happens to be true, that he has his hold of, that is going to benefit him in some fashion, I'm sure he will. But I would not. I am very reluctant to give him any credit for consistently having any integrity. Let's put it that way. Appreciate the call, Brian.
Yeah, new rule. You don't get to complain about cancel culture if you support canceling the results of other countries' elections.
Yeah. Or just complaining about cancel culture in and of itself, I think is a joke. I'm just sorry. Yes, I am sure that there are stuff on social media that goes to excesses. But like I say, this is more about who controls the levers rather than the machine that people are complaining about.
Word.
Calling from a 251 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Wombat Medic calling you from the Deep South. How are we doing, Sam?
Who is this?
Wombat Medic. Sorry, for reasons of my job, I can't give you a name better than that.
Okay, Wombat Medic from the Deep South.
Yeah.
What's on your mind,
Yes,
Wombat Medic?
Wombat, like the animal.
I wanted to say, Jamie, it's lovely speaking with you again. You spoke with me with Michael earlier this year, and it helped me out quite a bit, so I appreciate that. My job is I am a recruiter for an organization that works for the states. And I am super concerned and wondering what you would think that we can start doing to get the police out of military uniforms. Any kind of federal agent needs to not be so easily confused with a member of the military. And I don't mean just down to their gear and everything like that, but specifically the colors. And I know this is a weird thing to focus on with this, but especially for purposes of accountability, when I was in Iraq, when I was in Afghanistan, we were able to keep each other accountable because we stand out. And I think that when you've got police and agents walking around to the point where I've had friends of mine who work for the press sending me videos of them being tear gassed, but saying, hey, who tear gassed me? I don't know who this is, what agency this is. That becomes a huge issue.
Someone has introduced, I'm almost quite sure that there was legislation introduced very recently to insist that any type of law enforcement or whomever must have insignias on their uniforms. I don't know if there's anything that's been specific about the color of the uniforms, but they must have insignias. They must have names. They must have a badge number of some sort. And it escapes me at the moment. Somebody's going to show me, but somebody introduced it. And I don't think we're going to get it, obviously, while we have a Republican, in Senate. I don't know if we'll get it when we have Democrats in both houses.
I don't know. Changing the look of the police uniforms might be like the most radical extent of police reform that the Democrats are willing to do.
Right. We'll see.
And I know it's not, again, it's not much, but it does for purposes of outside accountability and for perception, because the military has made its fair share of mistakes. Absolutely. I will stand firm on that ground, and I won't ever deny that we've absolutely fucked up. But in instances like this, especially for when you have different state organizations going in who are doing good things, not necessarily all of them, great, but there's COVID relief, disaster relief. It's important not to murky those waters more than necessary, I feel. And we make fun of the Marine. We made fun of the Marines for doing it, but they trademarked their uniforms, so that nobody's ever going to show up in that. And maybe looking at something like that moving forward might be an answer, perhaps.
I mean, look, I think the bottom line is we cannot have any type of federal officers, whatever, what I like, it's hard to sort of characterize what they are because of this issue, right?
Yeah, I don't know what word to call them, and that's part of the issue.
And look, I obviously
it's by design.
Yes, it's by design, and there's no accountability, and it certainly undoubtedly impacts their behavior, right? Like, I mean, there's a reason why 100%. Cops take off their badges and their name tags during these protests, because it's basically a license for them to abuse people. And yes, there's a whole lot of other reforms that need to have that happen. But as a baseline, the idea that you have any type of law enforcement that doesn't have to have their identity on their, so that people can see it if they're involved in it, involved in particularly protests or anything like that, is just absurd. It's just absurd. Yeah. I mean, that should 100%. Be a complete baseline, like where there shouldn't be any controversy or debate about that.
I'll say this about that. I don't know that it actually helps that much to have their badge numbers identifiable, as we've seen over and over again when the cops act with total impunity. However, it's still a bad sign when they're trying to hide them.
Yeah. And I would imagine it changes their behavior on some level. I mean, look,
it's also a principle,
right? It's a principle. But you need to, and we've talked about this. We need to have prosecutions of police officers for what they do. But you also, to execute those prosecutions, you need to be able to identify them, and they need to be able to be aware that they can be identified by people, not via videotape or whatnot, some type of like extraneous methods. But appreciate the call.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You have a lovely day.
Apparently, Schumer and Murphy introduced legislation requiring federal law enforcement to identify themselves and their agency. I mean, I would, if it were up to me, I would make it like a firing offense on day one if a cop shows up at any type of cop shows up at any type of protest without their badge number and their name tag visible. Like, just, that's it. You don't even have to do anything before you get in trouble for that.
I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with some of my abolitionist comrades about where they come down on the issue of, supposedly holding the police accountable, prosecuting killer cops, et cetera. Because on the one hand, if you are coming at it from an abolitionist perspective, this kind of thing can create the impression that there are bad cops, therefore there are good cops, and the impression that reforming the system is going to work and it's not designed for bad reasons, it's designed for good reasons, we just need to tweak it a little bit. On the other hand, that's not the hill I'm going to die on ever, right? I'm not going to waste a ton of time and energy arguing that these killer cops should not be prosecuted, especially when so many people are calling for it.
Yeah, I mean, if there are cops in the streets, they should have badges on it. Once they're abolished, we don't have to worry about the badge numbers. But to the extent they're going to get in the street, let's have them identifiable.
Right. I mean, my notion of abolish the police is not to completely abolish the police. That I think they should have a much more narrow mandate and job. I think that. So in the meantime, holding them to account, I think, frankly, we need a society where people are held to account, regardless. And, if somebody's, got a job to, go and if someone has that much of authority in our society, we need to know who they are. I want more accountability in the context of government across the board, frankly. But when you have that level of authority, got a new poll coming out. Democratic Senate primary polling in Massachusetts. Who is this from, Brandon?
This is from a polling guy who runs an outfit out of Louisiana. He seems legit though. He's followed by all the major polling sites.
Markey at 40%, Kennedy at 36%. Come on, Massachusetts, don't let me down. Ed Markey, don't make the mistake just because Kennedy's running against him.
Oh, this is personal for you, huh?
Well, I mean, a little bit. I mean, not really, but I mean, I feel it.
Did you see the statement that Kennedy put out? Trying to imply that Markey is not committed to racial justice or whatever.
Jesus.
He's pulling out all the tricks.
Yeah, I find that. Yeah, I don't know that that's going to work. Here is Barack Obama giving a eulogy to John Lewis. In the main, I'm not terribly interested in what Obama has to say. However, because of the things that he talks about at John Lewis's funeral and the fact that Bernie Sanders echoed part of it anyways.
Bernie Sando sounds delicious.
Yeah, I like Bernie Sando.
And
we'll make one
the
of those
fact
later.
That Obama is so close to Biden and probably in many respects responsible for Biden winning the primary, or at least was enough of a force of leverage that Biden feels that he probably owes Obama, because he does. Here is Obama at John Lewis's funeral, basically calling for the end of the filibuster, which is a big deal.
Once we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, we should keep marching to make it even better by making sure every American is automatically registered to vote, including former inmates who've earned their second chance. By adding polling places and expanding early voting and making Election Day a national holiday. So if you are somebody who's working in a factory, or you're a single mom who's got to go to her job, and doesn't get time off, you can still cast your ballot by guaranteeing that every American citizen has equal representation in our government, including the American citizens who live in Washington, D.C. and in Puerto Rico. They're Americans. By ending some of the partisan gerrymandering so that all voters have the power to choose their politicians, not the other way around. And if all this takes eliminating the filibuster, another Jim Crow relic, in order to secure the God-given rights of every American, then that's what we should do.
I mean, that's a big deal, because there seems to be now a broad-based support. Like I say, Bernie Sanders came out shortly after that moment and said he supported getting rid of the filibuster, which is a new position for him. He has been somewhat of an institutionalist when it comes to these Senate rules. And the idea of getting rid of the filibuster, first of all, makes the Senate, which is a incredibly undemocratic, small d, body, slightly more democratic in some fashion. And the idea of enfranchising DC voters, and I know it's more controversial when to say this about Puerto Rican voters, but these, I'll tell you what's important about these. And of course, the Voting Rights Act, repairing the Voting Rights Act. These are measures which are both fundamentally more democratic, again, small d, and also ones that will enhance the power of Democrats, big D, at least in terms of establishing some type of beachhead. You'll notice when Republicans get in office, what they do is start passing legislation that will strengthen their ability to get reelected. Democrats never do this. And they should not only stop with this. Now, maybe John Lewis is not necessarily the thematically consistent with that, but they should be passing card check. I don't think they will, because I don't think they want unions to have that much power, but maybe eventually, if there's enough progressives elected, it's going to take a while. But look, you start re-enfranchising people, you start making it easier to vote for people, maybe you start getting the power of Amy McGrath's money doesn't beat the power of Charles Booker's supporters, grassroots support in a place like Kentucky. I don't know if either one of them could go on to beat McConnell, but that's an example of where these structural reforms, making voting easier for people, will both strengthen Democrats, but also strengthen democracy. And the more democracy we have, the more we will get, it seems to me. And so this is a big deal and it's interesting also that he labeled it Jim Crow, because once Obama does that, right, it starts to get into, and then it's like Kristen Sinema, you're not going to vote against the Jim Crow era filibuster.
Well, and it's also significant because the corporate interests that were behind Obama they took advantage of that filibuster during his administration, right? Like that was often an issue. Wasn't the filibuster big in that? Yeah, the healthcare stuff, right? Like
didn't Joe Lieberman filibuster the public option? Am I remembering that correctly?
Joe Lieberman didn't filibuster. I mean, that was more of it wasn't so much a filibuster. It was a negotiation. I mean, what will happen? I mean, understand
a regular buster.
Yeah. I mean, understand what will happen. It's going to move the power from a couple of, I don't believe that there are any moderate Republicans, but the closest to the center Republicans. It's going to move the power from them to someone like Manchin and Sinema, or Hickenlooper, or the guy, I can't remember his name now. Geez, in Arizona, Mark. I can't remember his name. It's going to move the power to the more conservative Democrats, because they are going to be the deciding votes on these things. And that we're going to have to contend with that. But at the very least, what it's going to do is it's going to allow for more conventional pressure to be put on the Democratic Party, because they will not have the fig leaf of the Republicans preventing this stuff from happening. And if you look at the Biden years, knock on wood that they happen, as I do, you will see them as years where there will be significant gains, I think, for the left, because it will make it very clear why we can't have good things.
Centrists.
And by good, it is going to make these elected officials more accountable. And that's basically what we're looking at. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I've gone back and forth about this, but I think that is a fairly strong argument in favor of having a Democrat for the left to fight against. My God,
that was always my theory about Hillary Clinton.
It would have been great. She would have been perfect.
On the other hand, Trump
I think Joe Biden will be good in the same way, because I think it's going to be really clear on where, like all this stuff where, like, ranging from we're friends with David Frum all the way through to, this is I went through this after the Bush years. Like, it became clear by 2010, like that dude who would come on Air America and sounded like everybody else is not like me. That we have a different set of values, and it becomes very clear, where who's with us on the left and who's not.
Yeah.
And that's very, very helpful, because then you start to realize, like, well, this is where we got to fight for. This is where, this increases the pressure on Democratic politicians who may be, sort of marginally there in some way. You can show up and you can be part of the progressive caucus in Congress, and you don't have to hold any beliefs because it's so squishy. And when it becomes down to the point, like Democrats are responsible for what we do or do not get, period, it becomes really clear on which Democrats, where they actually stand. And I think that's very helpful, because the reality is, at least for, the near term, we have two parties in this country. And there's one where we have significantly or marginally, whatever you want to call it, better shot of getting the policies we want from one of them as opposed to the other, just because they're more reliant. And it's just really going to be a question of, like, it's going to be a much easier argument to say that so-and-so in the Democratic Party is a problem when they actually have to make a vote that counts.
Yeah. I mean, on the other hand, I think the Trump era has been very good at bringing out just your garden variety liberals into these mass movements, which create openings for them to then be radicalized and moved further to the left, that maybe we wouldn't have had them there if it weren't for Trump.
I think there's some of that, but I also think that's also why Bernie got blown out in the primaries, is because those actually just want to go normal, and we haven't sufficiently radicalized them. So, I mean, I think the people that, I mean, I do think a lot of people have been radicalized over the course of the last 4 years. I think a much better case that, say, put Biden back in, those brunch liberals stop, showing up to primary elections, and we can start to actually get some work done.
Yeah. I mean, radicalized or even just politicized, right? Because I can't stop thinking about the number of people who said that they support Medicare for all, or even socialism as a concept, but still voted for Biden because they thought that he had the best chance of beating Trump, right? And I've talked about this before through the lens of depoliticization, where people might believe in a better world. They might think that that would be nice, but they don't believe that it's possible. So they only think they have to choose from the options that they've been presented with their entire lives.
Well, I think look, we don't have to choose really now between a larger subset of people becoming politicized and reacting to Joe Biden, because that's just where we are at this point. And so those people who were saying we should have Medicare for all, we're going to vote for Joe Biden because I think he's got a better chance of beating Donald Trump. In a Joe Biden era, that's when those people are going to go like, oh, well, we can have this now.
I hope so.
Let's have. Well, I hope so too. Who knows?
Also, I mean, Trump was nice, but I think a pandemic and depression are going to be enough for the left's propaganda, for the left to make propaganda use of.
Yeah, probably. It's almost like he heard people saying that George W. Bush had more bodies on him, and he was like, we'll see about that.
We'll see about that.
What about domestically?
Yeah, he wasn't, not so much domestically. I'll see if I can do that. It's always important to be a superlative. Here is Tucker Carlson. Now, for all you youngins, which is all of you who work on the show except for me, 20 years ago or so, Paul Wellstone was a senator from Minnesota. He died in a plane crash. He was probably at the time the most progressive senator in the Senate, or pretty close. I think he probably was. And his funeral, people talked about his values and promoted them. And in that era, this is, this is like, explaining to my kids, like, there were rotary phones, because this seems so ridiculous. But for months, the right wing had made, and the mainstream media made a huge issue of how the Wellstone funeral was politicized. I mean, I like it's the only thing I can tell you is I think Al Franken wrote about it in one of his early books, to go and check that out. Franken was very much inspired by Wellstone from Minnesota as well. And I say that to you because Tucker Carlson was around at that time, a snivelly little kid who was, again, doing whatever he could to sort of make his way through the conservative media ecosystem. And he brought back one of the oldies. Think about what should be. Hold on for 1 second. Think about what should be said at John Lewis's funeral. The guy's life was dedicated to the proposition that there should be nonviolent protest to get the rights of Black people to vote. He was beaten near death for that. Think about what's going to be talked about at his funeral. Go ahead.
American, then that's what we should do.
It's hard to believe that clip is real, but it is, down to the cloying fake accent, Mr. Hawaii guy. But take 3 steps back. Imagine if some greasy politician showed up at your loved one's funeral and started throwing around stupid partisan talking points about Senate procedure. Can you imagine that? You would be shocked if that happened. You'd probably walk out.
Pause it for 1 second. Let me just be clear on what he's talking about. He is talking about the filibuster. Now, he is not talking about your loved ones. Yes, it would be weird for Barack Obama to show up at some rando's funeral and talk about the filibuster. But for someone who dedicated their lives to get civil rights for black people, the filibuster was the number one tool that was used by people like Tucker Carlson to prevent that from happening. Now, Tucker knows this, but he also knows that his audience is full of ignorant people who are inclined to believe that Barack Obama's not an American, who are inclined to believe the worst about what happens when black people get together, frankly. That's, Tucker's demo. And also, coincidentally, his writing staff. But continue.
Imagine that. You would be shocked if that happened. You'd probably walk out. Desecrating a funeral with campaign slogans? What kind of person would do that? But Democrats in the audience didn't seem offended. They didn't blink. They cheered. It all seemed normal to them. And why wouldn't it? Political power is their religion. It's not out of place in a church. It's what they worship. People who will politicize a funeral will do anything, and they're trying to. Democrats are working systematically to dismantle the core institutions of American life.
Really? Like, the core institutions of American life have been oppression of black people, a systemic attempt to prevent them from voting. Barack Obama was calling for the reinstitution of the Voting Rights Act that a Republican Supreme Court dismantled. That's what that clip was. It was him saying, we've got to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which is a reinstitution of the formula in which there was pre-clearance of 14 states, a little more counties than that, that had a history of racism and preventing minorities from voting. And the Supreme Court destroyed that. Republicans refused to vote on reinstituting it over the past almost decade now, 7-8 years. And that's what he was calling for. And the idea that Tucker Carlson can go on his show and malign people for talking about it at John Lewis's funeral tells you everything you need to know about Tucker Carlson and about everyone who watches that show earnestly.
Yeah. We don't go down to your fascist funerals and tell you not to talk about fascism.
Exactly.
It's just amazing how he keeps his audience dumb by calling it parliamentary or Senate procedure, right? Yeah. Like, it's some minutia, like who can speak first and what kind of door they have to enter in, and not like one of the ruling classes legislative tools to stop any kind of progress in this country that's come up time after time as a huge impediment.
What's fascinating too is that he talks about desecrating a funeral where everyone there was perfectly on board with what was being said, right? Like, there's some type of objective standard of what funerals should be. Tucker Carlson knows it. I mean, this is where he's like, I'm curious as to what is that objective standard of funerals that Tucker Carlson's talking about? I mean, there is a break in the internal logic there. If you think if you think that there is not some judgment of the people there, right? Like, he's saying the problem is this greasy politician who shows up and desecrates the funeral, but then within seconds he says, and everyone there in the audience had no problem with it whatsoever. In fact, they were very enthused by it, that they were celebratory, that they were expressing their love for the person who passed. And yet there is some desecration of an idea of a funeral. I mean,
I think you're forgetting John Lewis's black sheep nephew, Tucker Lewis, who doesn't think black people should be allowed to vote.
Apparently. But I think, what's in there is a very, very subtle. It is very subtle. But you begin to tease that out. He's talking about desecrating the idea of a funeral. So he's talking there's some type of normative value. And these black people people cannot measure up to that normative value. That's what's going on here.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
they have
right
no value
that
for life and death. Yeah.
he's right that white supremacy is a core institution of America. I'll give him that.
All right, let's do something that's a little bit more consistent with the fun half to end it up. Folks, I'm sorry we haven't taken your phone calls today. I apologize. We're not going to get to any. I know, it sucks. A lot of people hanging on their phone.
Oh, we're not going to dunk on Bill Clinton?
What do we have for Bill Clinton?
Oh, man.
Yeah. We could do the Clinton thing. I mean, I'm not sure what Clinton was trying to say there, and I'm not sure that John Lewis would have had a problem with it. But let's listen to what Bill Clinton. Here's Bill Clinton at John Lewis's funeral.
And I say there were 2 or 3 years there where the movement went a little bit too far towards Stokely, but in the end, John Lewis prevailed.
That's a short clip, but he's talking about SNCC, which is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And John Lewis was president of SNCC. I'm going to get the dates wrong, but I think it was like basically 1965, maybe it was 66. Stokely Carmichael came in the year after, was in for, I think, about a year or so, remained associated with SNCC, but then basically rejected the credo of nonviolence. And there was some question as to whether SNCC would fall apart and whether nonviolence would be the primary driver of that organization and the movement. And I think that's what he's talking about there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Stokely Carmichael, later known as Kwame Ture, was also a big critic of capitalism and had a real intersectional analysis of how capitalism and white supremacy are intertwined.
Do you think, though, I mean, I don't know. It's quite possible that Clinton was talking about that. I took that as he was talking about about a non-violent or violent approach. Now, I don't know that I probably fall somewhere in between those guys in regards to, the value of violence in some of these movements. But let's play this clip. Here's John Lewis explaining the difference between himself and Carmichael. This is from C-SPAN, I guess. I don't know, maybe in the late 90s.
Back to Washington.
When was the last time you saw him?
I saw Stokely Carmichael about 2 months ago.
When he was here in town?
He was here in town, here in Washington, being honored. He is suffering right now. He's sick, and a group of people came together. It was the first time, I think, in probably 15 or 20 years, that all of the chairs of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, former chairs, have been together.
What would you say is the difference between the two of you and your philosophies today?
Today, I'm a believer. I am a believer in an interracial democracy. I believe in the idea of the beloved community. I believe that we must lay down the burden of race. I believe in integration. I believe that integration, like nonviolence, is one of those immutable principles that you cannot deviate from. I believe in America. I believe that we got to have coalition politics. We cannot divide the American house. We got to keep this house together and build one house, one community, one family. And I don't think Stokely shared that. Stokely is not a believer in the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. I believe in it as a way of life, as a way of living, not just as a means, not just as a technique. And I think some people, like Stokely and others, use it only as a means, only as a technique. And when that happens, it's just like a faucet. You can turn it on and you can turn it off. You have to choose today if you're going to hate somebody today and love somebody tomorrow. But when you accept nonviolence as a way of life, as a way of living, then everything that you do and everything that you say is governed by that principle.
Let me show you just.
So, I mean, I think, I look, I don't like Bill Clinton. I've never been a particular fan of Bill Clinton. I'm just not sure. I don't know what context he's talking about. I think he's talking about that nonviolence principle, which, I mean, I think
regardless, they're connected, right? Because more militant movements tend to view violence in a different way than less militant ones. And more radical ones tend to take a slightly different view. But the really bad thing about this,
Well, I was just going to say, like, this on the heels of Biden saying we should prosecute anarchists. I mean, I did take this as, where the Democratic leadership's head is sort of at on what they're seeing in the streets right now and kind of what they're bracing should they come back into power.
Yeah, they're like, everybody calm down. And it's also very offensive to kind of pit these different Black leaders against one another, right? Like, I
agree
will
with
admit,
that.
I looked immediately at Benjamin Dixon's Twitter as soon as I saw that clip, because I'm like, he is not going to like this. And he said, if I may read, y'all shouldn't have shown me this clip here. F you, Bill Clinton. Keep Stokely's name out of your filthy, warmongering, philandering, neoliberal mouth. And then he said, the subtext of this dusty-ass saltine slander against Stokely, good alliteration there, is that John Lewis was the acceptable type of Negro, and he is so glad that the acceptable Negroes got into power.
Right. I mean, I think that's true. I mean, I'm not defending Clinton's use of that in there. I just want to make it clear on what I think it is. The context is just sort of like it is akin to essentially, whitewashing those parts of Martin Luther King who was talking about stuff that was inconvenient for capital and for people and for neoliberals.
Yeah, and they both worked with Martin Luther King.
Yeah,
like, it's a much more complicated history than Bill Clinton understands it to be.
And I also think it's horribly inappropriate to do that in that context.
Yes, sort of a greasy politician coming to your funeral.
Right now.
Exactly.
When
I mean, that's the greasy politician. That's the one. If Tucker Carlson had any integrity, that's what he would have said. Trying to, it is not Bill Clinton's place to talk about, what white society is lucky that John Lewis was the one who, was victorious in that fight.
Right.
If you want to talk about the greasy
tone deaf.
Yeah, it's a Sister Soldier thing, really.
Yeah,
but
all over.
Why? Like, I understand why he did it the first time, because he wanted to win his election. I don't know the second time.
And she owned him, by the way. I encourage everyone to look up the clip of Sister Soldier responding to Bill Clinton, because it's amazing. But yeah, just generally a bad idea to come out and make this kind of tone-deaf statement at a time when militancy, specifically around the issue of racial justice, is rising in this country, and public opinion is largely on the side of the militants.
Yeah, I mean, we won't have Bill Clinton to be, sort of chiming in much more. I'm not saying that he's going to pass away. I just think that, like, there's not going to be that many opportunities for him to be relevant in that fashion, to be honest with you. And so,
tell that to Bill Clinton.
The beauty is, I don't think anybody's going to have to. I think it's just going to be like it's going to pass him by, and I think he's probably having a tough time with that.
I'm still here, y'all. Don't vote for my wife.
Exactly. All right. Lastly, let's end on this fun note. Folks, we're turning off the phones. Bing, bing. I don't want you to wait. You're not going to get on. Sorry. Apologies. So this is a little bit weird. I mean, I used to, back in the day, on Air America, I would call, I don't know if I would call them prank calls, but I would call, I guess it's sort of, but I would call like places like the Focus on the Family, or I would call politicians' offices, and I would say, that I'm Sam Cedar, I'm the chastity reporter from the Majority Report. I'm recording this for potential broadcast, and I would go in and I would ask questions or stuff like that. and then we would play it on the radio because wanted to be able to edit it down for time and whatnot. And, who knows? You don't want to call and have, no one answer on live radio. I never did anything like what Seb Gorka did, which is a little bit odd. And he is very, very excited that he did it.
Hello?
Is that Will Somer?
Oh, hey, is this Seb Gorka?
I've got a little quote for you, you sad, pathetic little snowflake. Get your pencil ready. Go.
Okay, give me 1 second. Is this really Gorka or is this an impersonator?
Go and stick your head in a bucket of eels. Did you get that? Did you get that?
No, can you do that again?
Stick your head in a bucket of eels. Okay, you sad little snowflake? You can quote me.
That was a call I had with Will Somer, who pretends to be a journalist at the Daily Beast this morning, who wanted me to give him a comment on the incident that occurred with me at a 7-Eleven where somebody threatened to shoot me if I didn't put a mask on. Will, again.
Put your head in a bucket of eels. Kind of like a weird, he's so proud of himself for calling Wilson. Now, presumably,
got him.
Presumably, Summer called and left his number, right, and said, I'd like a comment.
Feature comment, yeah.
Yeah, and then he called back, and he was so proud that I said to him to his face, except for on the phone, put your head in a bucket of eels, you snowflake. Now, what's weird is that any normal assessment of calling somebody up, recording it, which I'm fully in favor of. I do that all the time. I should tell everybody this. That if you're in a one-party state and I'm calling you, I'm recording you. But to call them up just to say, put your head in a bucket of eels.
To do a parody of yourself.
Yes, that you are the snowflake who is upset by whatever they did, which I guess was asking for a comment, right? You're not even messing with them. You're just going up you're a jerk. Did you get that? You're a jerk.
Yeah, where's the prank there?
There's no prank.
So Gorka has a bee in his bonnet about pranks because Chris James of Not Even a Show has been pranking him about his head size for a while. And so Gorka has got a few call screeners and they've been really on the case. And actually, they've been stopping them. Gorka's been screening the calls himself as if it was live to air. And then Gorka said he's going to release all of the pranks. So it's people saying, hey, you got a big head. And he threatened to release those, which is please, Sebastian, release those.
Wait a second.
Off air.
Is he not? So his show's not live?
I think he screens calls maybe in the break or something.
Wow. And so he pretends like he's on air to smoke them out.
And so he actually, I think Brendan has some DMs, but he actually smoked a bunch of them out yesterday and was gloating on Twitter.
Oh
my God.
These are the DMs that
Chris
had.
I saw those.
I love this. Please be a loser again tomorrow. We'll record all you and your friends' fails. We're making a full montage.
Yeah.
Need more of your disasters before your mom asks for her something back.
Phone emoji.
Oh, don't disappoint Jeff or my 3 million listeners. We're already at 11.5 million views on YouTube, so please don't stop embarrassing yourself now. Promise you'll call yourself. Eventually, you will cry live on air.
They have 11.5 million.
To be
I
fair,
got news for you. Here's the definition of a snowflake. You're a snowflake if you're afraid to take them live on air, said Gorka. How about this? Call into this show. We don't even screen you.
Yeah, call us.
Ever. You don't have to fake it. You can come on and prank me because I'm not a snowflake.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to put up the number. There we go.
Here's the number. Call in. Tell me to put my head in a bucket of eels. See if I can handle it.
Give us your worst prank, Sebastian.
Obviously, it's not a prank to say that to someone, but even as an insult, Like, how does it stack up to the
Oh,
insults
man.
that your young child son would make?
Honestly, like Saul, who's 7, would be so much more sophisticated about that. Like, even like, I don't know. Do you have Prince, what is in the can or something like that? I mean,
Hey, Will, I gotta go stick your head in a bucket of eels.
I mean, honestly,
That's the
Saul
joke.
would call. I could see Saul calling up and going like, your head is full of poop.
Yeah, your
Got
dude
you.
is-
Got you. Put your head in a bucket of eels.
I guess Art of War doesn't prepare you for pranks.
We should pit them against one another. It's important to fight people who are at your own level.
Is it possible that there's some type of literary allusion that I'm not picking up with the bucket of eels? Is that a metaphor for something? Is there something like that we're missing, or is it literally put yourself in a bucket of eels? Like, why wouldn't you just say, if you're going to call up, like, put yourself in a bucket of,
But Sam, a bucket of eels is the grossest thing you can think of, isn't it?
I'm gonna make you put your hand in a bucket where I have peeled grapes and tell you it's eyeballs.
I don't know. I mean, I saw a documentary
Your eyes are gonna.
once.
You have to close your eyes. I'm gonna put a blindfold around you. Tell you that you're touching brains.
I saw a documentary once about Japanese pornography, and it turns out not everybody dislikes buckets of eels.
There you go. There you go.
For some, it's a treat.
Maybe he's like, I'm going to use this clip for 2 purposes. One, to show how I owned you. The other, to have my fetish channel explode.
Genki Gorka's character, I'm not sure if I want to meet. We'll see.
Trumpy Bear. I will read a couple IMs and we'll get out of here. Trumpy Bear, Cernovich is the biggest cancel cock. Moon in the lake. When they thought COVID was just hitting blue states, they did nothing to slow the spread. That was an act of civil war. They think COVID will kill more POC than whites. This is an act of genocide, and the Democrats will not hold them accountable. I hope you're wrong, but I fear that you might be right.
Yeah, I mean, we had a congressman come out and basically say COVID's not a big deal because it mainly kills old people and minorities.
Otto Matt Black. How did we not learn about Matt's nickname earlier? Also, I'm sure Michael is looking down and laughing at the mold that has formed in the Bolsonaro's lungs.
Oh, my God. At least COVID is starting to kill some bad people. Like, I feel like Bolsonaro is on his 67th time, but you know what? Maybe 67's a charm.
He's got perma-COVID.
Traffic cone. Everything the GOP does is projection. They've already told us exactly what they're going to do during the election to delegitimize the results. They're going to mail in Democratic votes that are 1 on behalf of dead people, 2 on behalf of registered Republicans who will also cast their own votes, 3 intentionally pour forgeries specifically to get caught so they can make a huge stink and claim the results of fraud. I almost feel like we should just, print that out and hang it on the wall just to remember that prediction. Assy McGee, do you think it's possible the UFOs are another country's advanced air technology? I find it hard to believe that we don't have people who could reverse engineer something like that.
I bet the bears.
Going out on a limb here, says Disco Stu, but I think Alan Dershowitz is about to have a bad weekend at Martha's Vineyard. I suspect that may be the case. Yes, he may want to put some clothes on. Apparently, he walks around nude sunbathing.
Yeah.
Yeah. PCT Joe, are you afraid that if the election is delayed, that the only event that will end the delay is the Republicans fixing it so they win? Am I afraid if the election is delayed that the only event that will end the delay is the Republicans fixing it so they win? I just don't think that there should be a delay in the election, period, as a point of principle, frankly. Number 1 teen fan. Sam, did you see Pacman challenging you to a YouTube subscriber race? Crazy shit. No, I did not see that.
This is a Ronald Reagan production, I believe.
Oh, is that right? Well, by all means, subscribe to this channel. Maybe I got to make a video to defeat David Pakman's subscriber surge.
Get us to 1 million.
Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah, I want to be in 1 million in 2 weeks. What are we at now?
Neck and neck. It's 906 to 906 last time I checked.
We broke 900,000.
I mean, we
Yeah,
don't care.
last week.
We aren't.
We did
these
last
things aren't
week?
important
Oh,
to
well.
us. These things aren't important to us. We got.
All right, I want to get to.
Belong to you.
What are the chances that we can get to 100,000 by second week of August?
It's a matter of will, I think.
All right, let's do this.
Help us
Train
out,
boy.
fans.
I'm so convinced the reason Trump is pushing hydroxo so heavily has to do with Steve Bannon. Right-wing leaders exist all over the globe, Modi, Netanyahu, Abe, but only far-right leaders associated with Bannon, Bolsonaro, Trump, Boris Johnson, are unique for continuously pushing hydroxo. I for the life of me, like, I feel like someone's going to write a book about that. Listen to Barack and Michelle's new podcast, and it really shows a lack of class that they're already stealing Michael's unreleased right-wing millionaire ex-president blames the electric Obama character.
That's so tedious.
Dr. Demon Seaman. Hello, Sam. Big fan here. Thanks for acknowledging that you find my work impressive. It's truly a great honor to hear a human say that. If you'd like to learn more about my findings, please join me at onlyfans.com. Demon Does Dallas for the best independent anatomical research. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe. All right, 3 more. Rube Davin. Herman Cain passed 9 days, 90 hours, 9,000 minutes, 909,000 seconds, 990 million milliseconds after having gone to that June 20th Trump rally. Bare brains. So my local school district, New Jersey, is enlisting all students for in-person classes unless we actively choose to opt in for online-only learning. They're only giving us about 5 days from the time they sent the form until the deadline. Feels really sketchy. I'm in the same boat, more or less. It's really messed up. But who knows? Well, I believe me, I can't even talk about it. The anxiety that's producing. It's just, maybe at one point we'll have to, but infantile disorder. I'm sorry, didn't Antifa security forces in Seattle just recently kill 2 teenagers at that anarcho Chaz thing?
I don't know if those were strictly speaking Antifa, but I mean, fair point. That was a disaster.
I'm going to need to look into that a little bit further.
Colorado guy. While picking up my car from the mechanics, I overheard one of the clerks talking to a local tree trimmer about how both of their businesses had held up surprisingly well during COVID and how people who've been receiving unemployment didn't deserve to get the extra $600 a week just to stay home. The responsibility of leftists to focus this resentment as essential workers feel, myself included, not at the unemployed and powerless, but at our system of politics and capital that have left us to fend for ourselves, cannot be overlooked. Much love, MR crew. Rest in power, Michael. And the final I am of the day, Rob in Reno. Ben Shapiro's ideas about turning empathy off are less philosophy and more just a lecture someone gives an employee before they ask them to do something terrible. We had bioethics lectures about this. The point was not to comply, but to be aware of terrible people. Also, as mention of Star Wars only prompts an ad for Mr. Plinkett's Star Wars review, which is some of the best content ever made online. Not as good as you, but MR fans would appreciate. Cheers. Great show. Love you guys. All right, folks. Jamie, Matt, Brendan, good job this week. Folks, have a good weekend. We will see you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better.